across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, it's real, all right. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. Back tomorrow at 10. So Labour hinting at tax hikes for middle-class workers. This is amazing. This is the Transport Secretary. I don't know whether she let a cat out of the bag, admitting wealth taxes may be needed to fill a big financial black hole. Oh, maybe somebody didn't up the numbers in the first place. Could it be another U-turn that's on the way, affecting, inevitably, working people? Not quite what they said before the election. Also this afternoon, reviewers found that the controversial BBC Gaza documentary breached accuracy guidelines. You reckon? Yeah, let's just get the son of a terrorist organisation to present it. This comes as outrage and public trust becomes damaged as Greg Wallace has 45 complaints upheld, making his return to the BBC, quote, untenable. I think the word you're looking for is impossible. More on that. And skilled visas for diversity experts, poets and bloggers have sparked a backlash. Apparently it's a skill. Do these roles align with economic needs as the government aims to reduce net migration? Seriously? Who is running the gaff? You have to ask yourself. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Serious question for you here. Can this government last beyond the year? I mean, if the truth be known, let's just have a look at the build-up to all of this. All governments kind of partly make it up as they go. I mean, they start off, they have a sort of vague plan, and then they add some meat to the bones. That's how it goes. We all like to think they have kind of sort of some inner plan going on, a drop of wisdom, a roadmap of success, fiscal plans coming out of their red boxes. They don't. They have just a rough idea. That's how it is, a rough idea. But then July the 4th, 2024 happened, and we discovered we had a government who didn't even have a rough idea. In fact, they had no idea. Clueless and inept. This lot had a PhD in car crash politics. The U-turns are coming at us on a weekly basis, and we now see the next one on the horizon. Remember, no tax hikes for working people. That was the phrase. And if you're part of the Labour government, there's a certain amount of elasticity in the phrase working people. Labour were first rumbled on this one early doors, of course, when they attempted to say, well, that national insurance hike for employers doesn't really count. It's not a tax hike on working people. Well, it is if you're a working person who runs a small company, who might not even be earning as much as some of the people you're paying because you're trying to grow your small company. You're a working person. You've just lobbed a tax hike onto a working person. Fiscal U-turn number one. This is before we even got to winter fuel allowances. So yes, there is that. Now, it sounds to me as if we're about to see a right filthy old dip in integrity. By their standards, that's quite something. When we now have this kind of revision of the word working person, well, maybe it's just kind of people who are a bit richer. Could be that. They pledged in their manifesto not to increase taxes, so they've ruled it all out. Rachel Reeves faces a fiscal black hole that could be as large as 30 billion come the autumn. But don't worry, as you're being taxed out of your pants, consider buying an electric car. Because that's going to make you feel better, isn't it? Oh my God, I've got no money. I've got no money. I'm absolutely taxed like a flipping fool here. I feel like I've literally been mugged by my own government. What do I do? How do I get through this? Do I seek therapy? No, I'll go and buy a Nissan Leaf, because that'll make me feel better, won't it? Can't charge it anywhere because there's no infrastructure around our neck of the woods. They are going to put, we understand, a lot of money into this. In fact, it's a package of grants this week in an attempt to stimulate sluggish growth and sluggish demand in the EV market. Will include a £640 million grant scheme to reduce down payments on EVs. 0344 499 1000. Just there's a couple of things here. Can this government last beyond this year? Where are the taxes? Where should they fall? Because the government might say, and some would argue, not unreasonably, well, you've got to raise it somehow. You know, there's a lot of factors going on here. They're not all our fault, but most of them are now. Been there over a year. Yeah, they're your fault. We can safely say that. You could have done things to change it. You could have stimulated small business. You decided not to. It's not in your DNA. This lot don't understand. We haven't got a single face on the front bench that understands business. None of them have ever been in business. I mean, we had that fellow that was a top barrister, Reynolds. Oh, no, he wasn't, was he? Solicitor. No, wasn't one of them either. Oh, no, in fact, we had a chancellor that was a no, she wasn't one of those. We've had nobody that's got any experience in business at all. And then we scratch our head and go, isn't it funny they don't understand? They really think it's a sort of socialist, it's a sort of breathtaking naivety, but bordering on the criminal naivety, where you just go, well, there's a small business, they've got a shop, so tax them, because they must be rich, because they've got a shop. It's that kind of sixth form thinking. I really believe they believe this. 0344 499 1000. Can this government last beyond this year? Because we're about to see a group of people taxed again further. What do they mean when they say we won't tax? It was very clear in their manifesto pledge, and this is, they can't break the manifesto pledge. They pledged that they would not increase taxes on working people, ruling out increases in income tax, national insurance and VAT. But at the weekend, as we mentioned, Heidi Alexander, the Transport Minister, suggested the Chancellor could be forced to look at those on higher incomes. But are they not working people? Sorry, how does that work? What, are you stupid? I mean, how stupid would you have to be? If you wrote that in a dissertation, you'd be kicked out of university for crimes of idiocy. They go, hang on, you said at the beginning of your dissertation there's no taxes, and then further down in your dissertation, on word 1,250 of your 5,000er, you've literally written we're going to put some taxes on working people. You're a fiscal moron. Get out. Go on, don't ever come back to this university again. Fool. And this is the government saying this. Ah, yeah, but they're not real working people, are they? No, they're just the people that pay most of the tax. This is insanity. Can this government last beyond this year? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this story and the other big stories of the day. We have Reem Ibrahim back with us, Communications Officer at the IEA. Reem, good afternoon to you.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
I was on a bit of a roll there. Sorry, I could have carried on for about another 45 minutes. But, I mean, it doesn't add up, does it? We're living in this kind of mad world at the moment.
You're absolutely right. I've got to say, I did thoroughly enjoy listening to you discuss that, especially the fact that, you know, if you're a university student and you even an economics student, you know, at A-level and say, you know what, this is what I want, I'm going to increase taxes and hopefully we're going to raise more money. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the economy works.
100%.
It's so interesting with all of these conversations about wealth taxes. You've got people like Lord Kinnock going on saying, you know what, guys, if we implement a wealth tax today, 2%, we'll raise about £10 billion. But taking into no consideration whatsoever that these people will probably leave the country. You know, if you're a wealthy person, you're an ambitious person, if you're in your 20s even and you're young and you want to start a family, why would you stay in Britain? Why would you stay in socialist Britain?
Indeed, or you just find a really nifty accountant that would go, do you know what, perfectly legit, we'll just find different ways. It might cost you another couple of grand on my bill, but don't worry, we can make this legal and you can defer, or you can, you can't evade, but you can avoid. That's legal and frankly should be encouraged. So yes, you're allowed to do that, and that's what we'll see. That parks for 1 second, of course, Reem, just the sheer level of unfair, the sort of socialist insanity of thinking, we'll just go to rich people. That's all you do. I mean, I think they believe it in that kind of Janet and John style way.
It also fundamentally doesn't help the people that they are attempting to help, right? If you want the people that they are calling working people or working class people, if you want the poorest in this country to feel better off, what you want is economic growth. What you want is more jobs. What you want is high paying jobs. Everything the government is doing is completely an antithesis to that. And we really have to be very clear about this. The way you ensure that we have a growing economy is not by increasing taxes on the productive parts of the economy and spending more money. You know that public public sector spending is about to get up to 50% of GDP. So basically half the economy will be the government.
Yeah.
More than half the economy will be the government by 2050. I mean, really what we're talking about is a road to serfdom, a road to a socialist economy. It's interesting you mentioned the working people phrase. The government, of course, have always said, we're not going to increase taxes on working people. But that is the fundamental misunderstanding between the impact of tax and the incidence of tax. So the government will say, we're going to increase employers' national insurance contributions. Don't worry, employees, it won't affect you. But again, that's a misunderstanding of the fact that if you're an employer and you're making it more expensive to employ somebody because you've got to pay all of this tax to the state, then obviously what's going to happen is you're going to hire less people, you're going to increase their wages at a much slower rate, if at all, and you probably will also have to sack some people because you won't have enough money to hire those people in the first place. So this really is a misunderstanding of using those phrases. No matter what definition of working people you use, this government has increased taxes on them.
Indeed. Well, it fell to Heidi Alexander yesterday, who was forced out there to do the rounds and spill the beans, whether she did this deliberately or whether it was just a sort of accidental slip of the tongue. But let's have a listen to what she said. This interview particular on Sky News, the Transport Secretary speaking yesterday morning.
I think your viewers would be surprised if we didn't recognise that at the budget, the Chancellor will need to look at the OBR forecast that is given to her and will make decisions in line with the fiscal rules that she has set out. We made a commitment in our manifesto not to be putting up taxes on people on modest incomes, working people. We have stuck to that. We haven't put up income tax. We haven't put up VAT, apart from taking away those VAT tax breaks that people who send their children to private school get. And we obviously haven't put up employees' national insurance. But when it comes to taxation, fairness is going to be our guiding principle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things there. The VAT thing wasn't a tax break. It wasn't there at all in the first place. You can't suddenly add something and then say we're removing the tax break when it never existed because it was education for kids, even if it was private. So there's that. This word modest income, Reem, that she threw in there, that was never in the manifesto. Modest income. They're obviously looking for wiggle room on their working people line.
It is, and clearly it's because the obvious answer here is if the state is increasing in its size and we don't have enough money to pay for it because the government aren't able to raise that amount of tax, you reduce public spending, you reduce the amount of money the government is spending. And I would like to see the government do significantly less than they are currently doing. I think that the welfare rebellion the other week was just one fantastic example of that. These people that are in receipt of personal independence payments that need it, they will absolutely still get it. But the reform that they're proposing was literally just changing the eligibility so that there are certain people that unfortunately do not need personal independence payments and should not be in receipt of it. It was only about £5 billion. And they still weren't able to do that because their backbench Labour MPs have been able to take over the government. I think what's fascinating about the welfare argument is that we currently have a situation where 1/10 of the adult working population are on out-of-work benefits. So you and me and everybody else across this country that is working incredibly hard and paying extortionate taxes, highest taxes we have since the Second World War, we're paying all of this money, and yet 10% of the population aren't in work. Okay. So there's that part of it. Maybe that's a little bit about why we are seeing such sluggish economic growth. The last 2 months, for the second month in a row, the economy has shrank. The second month in a row. And are we seriously still sitting here and saying, you know what, we think this government might be okay on the economy? Things are going absolutely abysmally. And I'm really, really worried about this because I'm in my early 20s. I want to start a family in the next 10 years. And I love Britain. I love this country. I can't bear to see Britain in decline. But we have to be a little bit selfish. Do I want to bring my children up in a country like this, where there are no opportunities, where you cannot earn pay rises, where there is absolutely no room for economic growth, where the government will just take and take and take and take from anybody with an ounce of ambition? Is that the kind of place I want to live? I don't know.
Spot on. I think a lot of people feel the same. Let's have a look at this story. The BBC facing a crisis of trust. Again, Ofcom, a warning of a public backlash ahead of a damning report into scandals. It includes the Gaza documentary, Chance of Death to the IDF. Director General Tim Davie is under fire and fighting for his job. Let's have a listen to Melanie Dawes. This is the head of Ofcom speaking this weekend.
I think it's very frustrating that the BBC has had some own goals in this area with the Gaza documentary and then with the Glastonbury coverage. And, you know, it does start to erode public trust and confidence. I think I would say that, above all, what frustrates me and others is that when these things go wrong, it can take a long time for the BBC to see that something's happened when everybody else was there, you know, within a matter of hours. So I would say to the BBC, I think they need to get a grip quicker, get these reports and investigations concluded sooner. Otherwise, there is a real risk of a sort of loss of confidence in the BBC.
A loss of confidence indeed, Rim. We'll have to be briefish on this one, but, I mean, they're up to their neck in it over there at BBC HQ.
They are. I mean, some of us never had confidence in the BBC, but I think that maybe some of us were a bit more ahead of the times here. You're absolutely right. They're experiencing scandal after scandal. It's a really, really difficult situation. The issue at Glastonbury, I think, wasn't all their fault. I mean, they did try and pull some of it from live streaming. I think that that was basically incompetence or mismanagement of the situation. The issue with the documentary, though, there is no forgiving potentially paying terrorists to appear in a documentary. I mean, it's all alleged, but I mean, come on, that could be really, really bad.
I mean, even if they didn't pay them, the fact that you get the son of a terrorist to present an impartial documentary, I mean, that's just off the scale inept. I mean, it's in another category. It's journalistic crime.
It is, but this is the problem with a state monopoly on broadcasting, right? We have absolutely no choice but to give money to the BBC. It is government, and I would like to see, by the way, the BBC, I think, is a fantastic organisation. I think it does do some great work, and I think that some of the documentaries and series that they do are great. But if we all think it's great, let's make it a choice to pay for the BBC. Let's privatise the BBC, make it a choice for us to pay. And you know what? I have a slight feeling that not everybody will choose to.
I think you might be right. Reem, stay with us. More stories still to come. Over to you as well. 0344 499 1000. Can this government last beyond this year? And I know that's a kind of obvious question that you ask of rubbish governments. But there's more than a kernel of genuineness in me asking that. I am horrified what my government are doing. It's beyond inept. It's in another category. It's political criminality that is going on. They have no idea what they're doing. They are clueless, and they couldn't, frankly, run the proverbial. And we know, you know, who the figures are in all of this. Can they, as a government, though, last beyond this year? 0344 499 1000.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
As something you can indulge in, as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There's a lot to get through here. Let's move to this story. This is Labour's Employment Rights Bill. Reem Ibrahim is with us from the IEA. The Employment Rights Bill imposes a £5 billion stealth tax on workers, slashes wages and risks 1970s-style union chaos. It threatens economic growth and Britain's competitive edge. Let's have a listen to Angela Rayner. This was at the end of last year, speaking on what companies thought about her bill.
And we spoke to many businesses. They've been working with us to get the Employment Rights Bill forward.
Can you name a company, a few of them, that have welcomed these proposals?
Well, we've worked with many of the companies.
Name a few.
I've worked with so many of them, and they've very much welcomed the work that we've been doing on making sure that people...
You must be able to name a few, because I can name all the companies, the recruitment companies, Hayes, Manpower, Randstad. They've signed the letter. Which are the companies that have welcomed your employment rights?
Well, like I say, I've spoke to many companies. We've had many roundtables with them.
Will you get me a list of those companies, and then we can call them and say, do you welcome Angela Rayner's proposals?
Well, there's been many of the companies that we've worked with, like I say, so many of them.
Lot of companies, Reem. So many companies, roundtables, more companies, loads of companies. Which ones? Yep, loads of them. Can you name one? Loads of them. I mean, it was one of those great interviews where she just, well, we saw what happened.
She didn't have an answer to the question.
Didn't have
That's
a clue.
the point.
Yeah.
That was really funny. I like that clip. It's just proof in the pudding, right? It's actually interesting. I mean, there probably are some companies that are saying, yes, we love more regulation on the employment rights because it means that other companies can't absorb those regulatory costs and we are more competitive. I mean, basically, right, these new regulations are going to give huge amounts of power to unions. They are also going to make it significantly more difficult for businesses. Now, fundamentally, the question is, do we want to make it more expensive to hire somebody? That's the question. And if the answer to that is yes, then you would support this legislation. But we do not want to make it more expensive for somebody to hire another person. And that's really the question here, because that will then be financial. It is not HMRC taxing you even more, although as we know from our previous discussion that it's also going to happen. But what this is doing is it's making it more expensive, more costly for any business to hire an individual. As that happens, wages will get a lot more slow. We know we'll have less vacancies available. Anybody out there saying, you know what, it's really hard to find the job at the moment. These kind of regulations add to that difficulty, adds to that real restriction in the labour market. So what we want the government to then look at the labour market and say, OK, what we don't want is to add more red tape and regulation to businesses. What we want is to make it easier to hire people, because that will make things a lot more easy. We should completely scrap the apprenticeship levy. We should look at actually getting rid of occupational licensing for some jobs. Why do we have them for almost 20% of jobs? It's ridiculous. Allow people to hire who they think is best. Let's get rid of anti-discrimination legislation that looks at indirect discrimination. You know, hire people on their merit, how good they are at their job, not based on the colour of their skin or any other immutable characteristic. Let's look at why the labour market is so unable to move and so unabundant. Why is it doing that? And honestly, these kind of regulations do the exact opposite. They make things so much more difficult. And I think that what's interesting is a lot of politicians will say, look, we're giving you more rights, without a real understanding for what the consequences of those so-called rights actually are.
And then, of course, we have this curious juxtaposition of Labour criticising the British Medical Association over strike action while simultaneously building new policy which makes it easier to strike.
Yeah. you're absolutely right. I mean, this is interesting, right? Last year, the BMA, well, junior doctors, resident doctors, they now want to call because they think they're more important. They received I think it was 22% pay rise over the course of 2 or 3 years. So, you know, they already received a pay rise only last summer. And I think what is the proof in the pudding here, right? If you give them an inch, they will take a mile. And this is happening time and time again. They've now voted because they want a 29% pay increase, which is just astronomical. Anybody in the private sector, anybody working across the country, have you received the 29% pay rise? No. So junior doctors do not deserve one either. That's your money that you're paying taxes into that is going into those people's salaries. So the real question here is, how has that been allowed to happen? It's because, and I will say it is a party political point, but the Labour Party are obviously funded enormously by unions. So the relationship they have with the unions, I think, is incredibly delicate, incredibly important, and one in which makes it very, very difficult. Now, I'm not saying it's just Labour. The previous government weren't very good with unions either. But this kind of legislation makes it so much easier for them to strike, which means it's harder for you to get a GP appointment, which means going to be harder for you to get to work because you'll have the train union striking as well. So really the question is, do we want to return to the 1970s where you can't do anything because all the public services have completely ground to a halt because they're all striking because they want more money, and those employers can't even fire them because this legislation makes it more difficult for them to do so? Is that what we want? Do we want to return to the 1970s? In some ways, I think we're already there, Ian.
Yeah, it does feel that. And I didn't take very long to get there either. Where, I mean, they've been in power like a year. And we're seeing something more akin to what we might have expected from a Corbyn government than this apparent sort of Blairite government. There's nothing of the sort going on here. Here's an interesting one just to finish on. This is a trans swimmers row. I don't know if you're familiar with the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association. You'd like to go to one of their Christmas parties. I bet that's a right mother of a blowout over the festive season. Anyway, they are supporting trans people using their pool, whereas other groups are saying, hang on, this isn't right. Sex matters. The legal action, the group are challenging Hampstead Heath's pond policy, allowing transgender women to access the space. The Kenwood Ladies Pond Association says trans women have used it for years without a problem at all. Where do you sit on this one?
I think that a woman is an adult human female, and I think clearly the Supreme Court's ruling on this particular matter means that the legislation also argues that when we're discussing women, we are discussing women that are biologically female. That being said, I'm not sure what this organisation is. If it's a private company and they are saying, you know what, it's our policy for us to allow men into women's swimming pool spaces, and they're very clear about that, then I don't really have a problem with it if it's a private company doing whatever they want. Where I have an issue is where taxpayer-funded councils, leisure centres are being forced to allow men into their women's spaces. And this is really important because, I mean, I come from a Muslim family. I have many women in my family that wear the hijab, and they would not want their hair to be seen by biological men. And so when you allow trans women or these men into female spaces, you do make it so much more difficult, and it means that those women aren't able to enjoy the spaces. So I have no issue with the private company doing whatever they want with their own spaces and their own money, but I do have a problem with taxpayer money going to these kind of ideological issues.
And there we have it. Reem, thank you very much indeed. Really, always lovely to have you on. Really appreciate your time. Reem Ibrahim, Communication Officer at the IEA, always talking a nice drop of common sense. Over to you. Can this government last beyond the year? And your overview, if you will, on potential tax hikes. What constitutes a working person? That's where they appear to have, once again, the elasticity of language playing its part as they morph the word working person into something very different to what they said at the beginning of this charade. 0344 499 1000. We're also getting some breaking news reporting that 4 people have died in that plane crash at London Southend Airport. Happened over the weekend on Sunday. It was a little while before that information came through. Clearly there were devastating scenes as we saw there. As we get more detail, we'll bring it to you, but that is the latest, that 4 people have died in that crash in Southend at the airport there. Back to you, more of our guests as well on the way. 0344 499 1000, just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Talk 0344 499 1000. It's 25 to 2. This comes in from Alan, who says, I don't mean to put a dampener on things, but I now believe that nutty guy holding the sign saying the end is nigh, more than I do this current government. Yes, the guy with the sandwich board is sort of slowly becoming, he did have a point after all. The end is nigh, and we've now reached nigh. Maybe that's what's going on. In a moment, we'll speak to Lord Moylan, the Conservative peer, just on that issue of, what is happening with our economy. And this is what appears to be a more than questionable year in power for one government. And that's not a partisan point. I mean, objectively, I think if you look at what is happening, it's sort of that phrase, it's all over the place, like a mad woman's breakfast. It's all over the place. Love that phrase. Let's first speak to Ross Clark, columnist over there at The Sun, of course. Afternoon to you, Ross.
Good afternoon.
I mean, there's a lot of areas here that touch your area of journalism and interest. I know that. But, I mean, let's just start with the nuts and bolts of this. What I really can't quite believe, the elasticity of the phrase working person, which was first tested, of course, when they decided that an employer national insurance hike wasn't a working person. Even if you were a small business that run a very tiny company, you're a working person. Many of those business owners pay their staff more than they pay themselves because they're trying to build a business. And then they got collared with a hike in taxation, which went against the manifesto. And now we're hearing Heidi Alexander, you're using this curious term. Those working people on modest incomes. So now there's a different kind of working person coming around the corner, it seems, Ross.
Yes, and of course the context behind this is that the government has promised not to raise taxes on working people. So that's why the definition of a working person becomes so critical, because it infers that if you're not a working person, then you are game for tax increases. Now, Heidi Alexander yesterday seemed to water down the definition of what a working person said. We promised not to raise taxes on working people on modest incomes, which not in the original promise at all.
No, not at all.
It would, appear to open up the possibility for tax rises on middle earners and high earners and everything else. Now, it's important to state that since she spoke, Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, has effectively shot her down and said, no, we do mean people working. When we say working people, we mean people who work for a living, anyone who has a pay slip, he said. So he seems to have sort of restored the tax promise. But of course, it's a promise that's already been broken because of the increase on employers' national insurance in last year's budget. I mean, that was quite clearly an increase in national insurance, which the government said it wouldn't raise.
Which is rather interesting because, as you say, the fact that Heidi Alexander has now been contradicted by the Chief Secretary. I mean, I don't imagine she just said that as a slip of the tongue. That sounds like an arranged phrase, modest incomes. Clearly either testing the water or letting the cat out of the bag, one of the two.
Well, it does. Ministers go on these programmes. They very rarely go just talk off the cuff. Off the cuff, sorry. I mean, they have been sort of prepped and taught to use which phrase the government wants them to
it's a very specific way of phrasing it.
A very deliberate way of trying to water down that tax.
100%. But listen, we needn't worry, Ross, because happy days are around the corner, because soon we're all going to be driving an EV, because they're suddenly about to say, while we're crying into our wage slips, thinking, blimey, can they possibly tax me anymore? Don't worry, I'm about to go and buy a Nissan Leaf, because they're going to make it slightly cheaper, because the growth in EVs is, to coin a phrase, sluggish.
Yes, well, Heidi Alexander in the same interview sort of seemed to suggest that she understood why people aren't buying EVs. She said, well, I live in a mid-terraced house. I've got no driveway. It's impractical for me to own an electric car. Well, that's the same for about 8 or 9 million households which don't have their own driveway. Yet the government's now sort of proposing, you know, we've got to get these EV sales up, and the way to do it is bung yet more grants at EV buyers. So there's going to be an announcement this week of a reintroduction of electrical vehicle grants. These are things which were in place under the Conservatives, then they were phased out, and now Labour seems to be increasing them. But, you know, any grant towards buying an electric car, you're going to have the same problem. The money is going to be, these grants are going to be scooped up by relatively well-off motorists, and you know, the rest of us can just stuff it.
100%. I just can't work out why they can't allow. I mean, if you want to have an electric car, that's great, and if you can charge one, that's fabulous. And if you think you live near an area where there's adequate infrastructure, that's all great. This stuff can happen organically, right? I mean, you don't need to have government initiatives. If it's the direction of travel, the market will decide it's the direction of travel. And there's nothing wrong with that. Lots of people I know that got EVs absolutely love them to bits. They find it cheaper. It works for them. Other people I know gave it a go. Didn't quite work for them, but just let the market do its thing. You don't need to coerce it with £740 million of taxpayers' money.
Yeah, and let's not forget, at the same time as this sort of carrot is being dangled in front of motorists, there's a very large stick being used against the car manufacturers, who are under obligation to ensure that 27% of the cars they sell this year are pure electric. And you face, you know, swinging fines of sort of £15,000 per vehicle that they fall short by. So, you know, you've got to ask yourself if these huge incentives and sticks, punishments are not moving the EV market. There's something wrong with the product. That the motorists simply do not want to buy it. And you know, Heidi Alexander hit on one of the reasons. They're impractical, and there's also the range worry. I mean, you know.
Yeah, but this is Ed Miliband's super dream, isn't it? I mean, you know, you can when Ed Miliband, I mean, he's so evangelical about all of this. Nothing, it seems, Ross, will stand in his way. But we will watch with interest. Ross Clark, as ever, thank you. Columnist over there at The Sun. Let's speak with Conservative peer Lord Moylan. Lord Moylan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Sorry to bring the words Ed Miliband into the conversation there, but I mean, let's pick up from that point. I mean, this is a government that it's hard to see philosophically what it sort of really stands for. I'm not absolutely sure it knows. We were sort of told it would be a bit Blair-likey. Sounds a bit more Corbyn-like at the moment.
Well, it is a bit Corbyn-like. I'm preparing to be thoroughly frightened this afternoon when Ed Miliband gets to his feet, and he's going to attempt to terrify us all about climate change. He calls this radical facts he's going to give us. And we're all going to be thoroughly terrified, and then we will buy the electric vehicles without needing any subsidies, and we'll stop eating beef and all the other things they want us to do. So I hope you're ready for that, Ian.
So Ed Miliband's big list of radical facts. I mean, that sounds like almost a satire show, right?
It does. It's a frightening experience. It's going to be at 3:30 in the House of Commons. Tune in, everybody, but remember the children. Just don't let the children see it without pre-screening. This is something that should be in the online.
You can then watch it nightly at the Pleasance Courtyard at the Edinburgh Fringe. It's got that feel about it. But this has become.
Meanwhile, the tax are coming. Meanwhile, the tax rises.
Of course.
Are coming. I suspect what's going on is a bit of a row between Number 10 and the Treasury. And remember, Heidi Alexander is very close to Keir Starmer. I wouldn't be surprised personally if she wasn't the next Chancellor when they move Rachel on. I think, you know, they're preparing ordinary working people for the higher taxes that are on their way, while the Treasury is still hoping something to be done about cutting expenditure. And that's why maybe Jonathan Reynolds and so on has been so keen to slap Heidi down. I think it's all a bit of a public manifestation of a row that's going on. But in the end, Starmer will win, and it will be higher taxes because he's tried cutting expenditure and that doesn't work.
Indeed.
But the Labour Party won't let him.
They absolutely. They are obsessed with, this idea that you can't, save money or attempt to be fiscally responsible is completely at odds with the thinking of many of his own backbenchers. But of course, he's then got to find who he taxes. And again, this curious misuse of the word working person, which seems to mean whatever they want it to mean on any particular day that suits them.
Well, today it means people on low incomes. So now we know the middle class is paying the tax rises, but that's inevitable because people on very low incomes, there's no point taxing them because they don't earn enough to pay a decent amount of tax. Sure. All taxes in the end fall on middle class and higher earners. Something like 10% of all our taxes are paid by a small portion of 10% of our population pay the great bulk of our taxes. So they'll be the ones expected to open up again. But it's worth coming back to EVs on this because, your correspondent just now made a comment about people not being able to install EV charging and therefore they can't have an EV car. I'm in the same position as Heidi. I live in a flat. I don't have a drive. I live in a flat. But I think there's a big question about people who struggle to have a car but do need a car. The sort of people who, have buy a second-hand Ford Fiesta, and it's a complete lifeline for them. Those people are never going to be able to afford an electric vehicle. Sure. So what is going to be done for them? And when you ask the government about this, I did ask them once here in the House of Lords, and they said, well, we need to do work to develop the second-hand market in EVs. Well, you do need to do a lot of work because I don't know anybody who wants a second-hand battery. A 3 or 4 year old car. When all these fleet cars are, 3 years old, they'll be sold off by the fleets. And that's when poorer people can come in and they will buy a second-hand fleet car at the same price as a Ford Fiesta. But will it be worth anything? That's what nobody knows. Well,
there's the point, isn't it? Our lack of information on this, what is still, fairly new in the grander scale technology. And as you rightly say, we're being asked to. You wouldn't walk into Tesco and ask for a packet of second-hand Duracells. So no, you wouldn't. Why would you want to do it for your car?
Can I have a 3-year-old Duracell? You feel. You're being palmed off with something.
Yeah, absolutely spot on.
That is the government's plan, and there's no subsidy regime that's going to sort this out. There's no level of subsidy that's going to make electric vehicles work. But people who live in the country, say in the countryside, have jobs in the country, need a car, and their market point, what they're looking for is the second-hand Ford Fiesta, and that sort of price range. There's no subsidy that's going to work for them. So the whole thing has to work on the basis of coercion in the end. Same question about all these charging points. They're introducing a measure in the planning bill which makes it much easier for companies to install charging points on the street. They'll be able to come into the street. But my question is this: if you don't have a drive or a garage, and you park your car on the street, you live in a city, you park your car on the street, how many of these parking places are going to be taken up for electric vehicle only? So that you, with your petrol car, maybe your second-hand Ford Fiesta, again, you're being squeezed off the streets because there'll be no parking for you. Yeah. That's another thing people have to worry about.
Well, we will see when the prophet of doom, Mr. Miliband, stands up this afternoon with his big list, his prophecies of where we're going in the next 10 years or so. It'll be grim reading, as you rightly point out. But listen, great to have you with us, Lord Moylan. Thank you for your time. Conservative peer, Lord Moylan. And just on that point of Ed Miliband, this is a pretty creepy guy, and I don't mean that to be deliberately insulting to him. I'm sure, if you sat down with Ed over a bacon sarnie and a cup of tea, you'd have a bit of a giggle. Well, maybe a little bit of a giggle, quite possibly. But this whole net zero thing, read the room, Ed. I mean, he's got literally no idea how to sell this thing, and nothing is stopping him in his tracks, not even his own. I mean, the expense of all of this, I've said for a long time, you have a parallel system. If you want your windmill things and that stuff you put on your roof, the solar panels and the EVs, just let all of that happen organically, that's fine. And then we can work it all out. And then I promise you, as sure as night follows day, that industry, that whole more efficient and cheaper energy, if that is the case, will take over. It'll be as simple as that. You don't need to coerce it, Ed. Just let it happen, sunshine. 0344 499 1000. Can this government last beyond this year? We'll go to your calls. EV drivers, pick up on the point there with Lord Moylan. Set the second-hand battery question. That's the one I think we all wonder about. I've never had an EV, don't know anything about... Well, I've driven one as a kind of test thing. Never owned one. He's right, it would concern me if I had a second-hand battery, because I wouldn't know what that really means in reality. 0344 499 1000.
But if you drill down to the stats, as I've done a little bit, it's clearly not just, you know, the super rich that are getting, but, you know, people that want to make a living, make a business, just don't seem to be wanting to stay in Britain. Don't feel that this is a competitive environment to succeid in. 40,000 people alone moved to Dubai last year, on top of the 30,000 that moved the year before. Those are 2024 numbers. I would hate to think what 2025 numbers are going to be like, and that's just one country alone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
John's in Suffolk says, really enjoying the show. Regarding your question as to whether this government will last to the end of the year or not, I believe, sadly, they will last the end of this year, but I really hope they don't. We're witnessing the gradual decline and destruction of our country, which is happening on a daily basis. I mean, the question... Thank you, John, by the way, and for your nice comments. I mean, the question is slightly tongue-in. Of course they will last to the end of the year, probably last till 2029. But written within that question is that just the sheer... incredulity of the situation that a government so inept could even be functioning with a group of people running it that have little or no experience of running anything. Mark's in Lincolnshire. What do you got for us, Mark? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi
there, mate. Yeah, where it is, the eco thing. You were talking about with your guest there. You know, which companies are happy with Angela Rayner? You know, when Angela Rayner was going on about...
Oh, it's a beautiful clip, that, isn't it?
Yeah, we spoke to so many companies. Well, I did think of one that probably is really, really happy, and that's Dale Vince's Ecotricity, whatever that bloody...
Ecotricity.
Ecotricity, that's it. For goodness sakes. Yeah, he's probably well happy, you know, Mr. Net Zero profiteer that he is. You know, he's probably championing, you know, Ed Miliband. In fact, I think he does, doesn't he?
He's definitely a supporter of Ed Miliband.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, but then again...
But then, to be fair, he wouldn't be alone in that, would he? I mean, there is this kind of, you know, whether they're a fringe selection of people, Mark, or whether whoever, there is, oddly, still, if you think about it, millions of people in this country who voted Labour for this reason.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because they're, just like Labour, they're ideologically warped. They can't see... Well, I said to your researcher producer, whoever I spoke to...
I remember that when I'm in a bar next time and somebody gives you the hump, you know, and says, the trouble is with you, mate, you're ideologically warped. It's a beautiful turn of phrase.
It is, fantastic.
Might get a smack in the chops for it, but it's worth giving it a go.
Depends. Just make sure you say it to somebody shorter than you.
100%.
Totally. Or a woman, that's, you know. But, yeah, I mean... Honestly, I think when I say that, it's because you could present however many facts that you like. You know, you could take the world's best premier economist in the absolute world. You could take him to go and speak to, you know, what's her face? I can't even think of her name now. Bloody... God, my head's all over the place. You know, I mean, the Chancellor.
Reeves.
Reeves.
Ricochet Rach.
Yeah, good old Rachel Thieves. Anyway, you could take that economist to her, present everything to her, and she'd still go ahead on whatever path Starmer wants, because, as I say, this ideological warp...
But yeah, what is their path, though? This is the bit that I'm really struggling with. What is their path? Even Rishi Sunak, who wasn't great, but... I sort of had a rough idea what underpinned his thinking. You know, he was if you like, your classic conservative. He wasn't ambitious and he wasn't hungry enough or brave enough to take some of the greater challenges. But I kind of knew what... Starmer, I haven't got a clue.
I think the only answer I can come up with that is what I've felt all along, what I've said all along about him. And many certainly in the cabinet, the ideology that they're promoting, that they're trying to go through with, is very much anti-British. It's very much, you know, pro-globalism. I think that's how it will continue on with them until they're either stopped, you know, either the public force them to stop, you know, through, you know, not necessarily rioting, but, you know, just getting up on the streets in sufficient numbers where they're forced to call a snap election, because the anger's so, you know, becomes so palpable that they can't ignore it. That will either happen, or it will get to a point where the backbench will oust him. You know, they'll just start voting, even policies, even Commons votes that they agree with. They'll just vote against him just to try and get rid of him.
And get rid of him. I've got to ask you this, Mark. Have you got an EV car?
No, I don't drive, mate. I can't drive. So
you disgust me.
Well,
you don't own an EV.
I spoke to you last time. I'm housebound, mate. What the hell use is a car to me?
You should have one anyway. Come on, join the support for Ed Miliband. Doesn't matter if you can't drive. Just buy one.
Ed Miliband.
Where's your national patriotism, Mark?
Miliband, he's already written to me, said he really, really appreciates everything I'm doing for the environment. I replied to him and I said, honestly, Ed, I think about you every time I've got my AC on during summer for like 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, you know, thanks, you know.
There it is. I'm glad you're on writing terms with Ed Miliband. I love it. Mark, you've been great as ever. Thank you, Mark in Lincolnshire. David's down in London on EVs. Are you an owner, a wannabe owner, or an ex-owner, David? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian. No, I'm probably never going to have an electric car. Ian,
Scandal.
Yeah, well, what I want to say is that I think the government and mayor have taken, in the last 5 years, they've taken away so much road space. The Conservatives implemented the land grab with their low-traffic neighbourhoods, as Kevin O'Sullivan would say. And also, a lot of drivers, they don't trust the government. I would never have dreamed, Ian, that the government would ban cars from London Bridge, but they have. And so if they're capable of doing that, I'm quite sure they'll close another bridge. So a lot of us drivers, we don't trust the government, so there's no point in buying any kind of car.
Is that right about London Bridge?
See, I don't understand, Ian, why journalists don't know this.
It's just I'm looking out the window at London Bridge. That's why I asked.
Well, you can't drive there unless you're a black cab between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Yeah, Finn's got a clipboard. He's checking the data. He thinks he might have seen a Morris Minor go over about 2 minutes ago. But so you're talking about the black cab and the buses thing, and there's
you might see a car that you might be driving over it by mistake. He's going to get a fine.
That's true. You get a fine. So we live in you're right, David. Listen, I'm with you 100%. We live in a world where you can't. And it's a great analogy. You can't drive across London Bridge. You know, good old London Bridge, world famous bridge. I know it's not Tower Bridge, but you take the point. It's next to it, kind of. Thank you to David down in London. 03444991000. Our lines are open. Lots to come in the next section. We'll be back on the other side of the news right at 2 o'clock, which is coming to you next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There is a lot to get through. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, right here at the home of Common Sense. We are, of course, talking at Labour, hinting at tax hikes. Wouldn't that be nice? Tax hikes for middle-class workers. This was after the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, admitted wealth taxes may be needed to fill a massive financial black hole, which, let me remind you, come the next budget, could be as high as 30 billion. This is from the Chancellor that was going to make it all go away. So it looks like there's another kind of U-turn on the way. We're used to these. We sort of get one a week, it seems, at the moment. Could this be the next one? Also this afternoon, the review that has found the controversial BBC Gaza documentary has breached accuracy guidelines. You think this comes as outrage and public trust becomes damaged, as Greg Wallace now has 45 complaints against him upheld, making his return to the BBC impossible. Details on that. And skilled visas for diversity experts, poets and bloggers have sparked Bit of an old backlash over there at Government HQ. Do these roles align with economic needs as the government aims to reduce net migration? Really? We need more diversity experts? We got to bring one in from China? You sure about that? Someone's making this stuff up as we go. 0344 499 1000. And we're asking that question, can this government last beyond this year? More comment coming in from you. This from Paul. Surely working people are people who work and pay tax. Why do they want to baffle our brains with BS? Please make it all stop. I agree with you on that. Paul in Fife referenced the BBC, who says the BBC and the licence fee, why doesn't it simply do advertising like other channels, self-finance itself, scrap the licence, sorted? There's a couple of weird arguments, oddly, even from people who ordinarily would say, well, just take ads. It could cause huge damage to the commercial TV and radio world. Because they have, in many areas, a kind of ready-made advantage that has gone on for decades. And that advantage, financial advantage, and all that goes with it, has meant it's been able, in certain areas, to build huge audiences at taxpayers' expense. And then you unleash that onto the commercial world. You know, if you own Coca-Cola and McDonald's, you're going to go, what sponsor EastEnders? You bet I will. Yeah, it's not as many as it used to be when Angie and Den were in it, but it's a big old audience. Absolutely right. You know, Radio 1 breakfast show or something, God knows what, you know. So there is a problem with that, but yeah, broadly speaking, I agree with Paul. I mean, that would be the answer to all conundrums, wouldn't it? Just put it out to the market and see how well it does. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home, is back with us. Afternoon to you, Alan.
Afternoon, Ian.
Good to have you with us as ever. I mean, let's start with the, well, what is a working person? Because that seems to be at the centre of all of this. It sort of started out that, well, it was any working person. Then we discovered, well, not a working person that runs a small business, because they're going to get a national insurance hike as an employer. And now it turns out anyone that sort of might earn more than a modest wage could also not be a working person.
Yeah, and I think that shifting definition could land Labour in a bit of trouble, really, because you're right. It was used as a very specific sort of framing so that when the tax rises that we saw in the budget last year were done, Labour could try and stick to this idea that they were not raising taxes on so-called working people. But if you now talk about lower incomes, then you're saying people on higher incomes, they're not working people. It does become very difficult for the government, but I'm sure we'll get onto it's partly because the straitened economic times they find themselves in, they're going to have to reach for certain levers that they haven't been able to reach for before. And it's how they come to justify that, I think, is going to be kind of a defining feature of how kind of Rachel Reeves' economic plan goes with the public in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's never easy for any chancellor, particularly when economies are not growing, and we haven't, you know, significantly grown for a long, long time. And I know that does predate Labour as well. But then I'm always reminded, Alan, back in 2008 when there was a global financial crash, I can remember every fiscal brain in the land, you know, Governor of the Bank of England at the time, and all sorts of people saying, look, this economy, after 2008, people forget this, many of those people said, don't expect any growth for an entire generation or more, because the damage is so substantial that it will be impossible for any government to see growth. So we're maybe just experiencing what some people predicted.
Yeah, but I think the problem that goes alongside that was that back in 2008, we ended up with very low interest rates and very low levels of inflation, which meant that you didn't have to spend an awful lot more to keep up pace with inflation. And also you could borrow more at much, government borrowing, sorry, could be done at much lower prices. The fact is the cost of government borrowing is really sky high. Inflation has started to come down from when it increased in 2022, but it's still kind of above where the government wants it to be. So it's a really difficult situation that it finds itself in, that the borrowing can't really take place, especially if Rachel Reeves wants to stick to her fiscal rules. So therefore it has to come down to either tax rises or spending cuts, neither of which obviously the government wants to do. But it's going to be very difficult for them to make that kind of, if they want to stick to those rules, to come up with something that doesn't involve pretty chunky situations in either of those options.
Yeah, but we can all look forward to a life of an electric car. There's the good news. So if you thought you were down on your luck shocked and a tax was coming. Don't worry, go and buy a nice electric plug-in vehicle because they're going to be, well, I don't know whether they're going to be cheaper. There's going to be maybe 700 million quid's worth of subsidies. So they've got some money for that.
Yeah, and I think the problem that the electric vehicle market's had for a long time is that it's essentially that the fewer electric cars there are, the kind of more expensive there is, and there isn't really a second-hand market yet because there hasn't been enough onto the market where people have had them and then sold and got another one. So the market at the moment still looks pretty tough from the outside. I think what you need essentially is a moment when if you flood the market with subsidies and therefore get an awful lot more electric vehicles on the road, then eventually it could, because then the prices will start to come down and it will seem less, tricky choice to make. But at the moment it still looks like a more expensive choice. And Heidi Alexander, the transport secretary, saying that she doesn't have one at the moment, partly because she lives in a terraced house, so therefore there's no way, you're not allowed to block the street with a cable coming across it, so therefore it's very difficult to charge it at home, which is where most people do their charging.
Yeah, but if they're consistent with their arguments though, Alan, you could say, well, you haven't got a petrol pump outside your house either, you drive to a garage to do it, so just
yes, but the time that it takes though, you don't spend 3 hours at a petrol station.
Agreed. No, I totally agree with that, but you do wonder where Ed Miliband's riposte will come from when enough people apparently standing up in the House of Commons this afternoon to reel off some more doomsday scenarios and figures. So I assume this will be mentioned in there somewhere. But can you really get what appears to be a market that isn't growing at the rate they wanted it to grow? Are you really going to get people in times of trouble when there's tax increases around the corner, even if it's not because life's very expensive. People aren't getting pay rises at the same rate they used to, unless you're a doctor, of course, then you get a couple every year, it seems. But at the moment, to try and stimulate a market, it's pretty difficult circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, and I think that's what they've come up against in the last couple of years. Is that both Conservative governments, obviously with their kind of net zero policies, and Labour that have taken over, have looked to try and not manipulate the market, but kind of force the market in certain ways by putting in these, not just the 100% have to be either hybrid or electric by 2035, but also putting in these kind of markers along the way that it has to be sort of 20%, then 40%, then 60% going along the way. So it's really trying to force the manufacturers towards it. But the fact is that, you can take a horse to water. You can't necessarily make people buy an electric vehicle if they still don't think that economically it makes sense when they've got their sort of 3, 4, 5-year-old diesel car that's still doing really good economy and is much cheaper to run. So I think that's where the tricky thing is. And the government can only push people so far. I think there has to be a pretty dramatic. I think they think there's a watershed moment that once kind of they reach a certain level, it become much easier. But we're still, I think, a long way off reaching that level.
Yeah, it does seem so. We'll watch with interest to see what the Net Zero Secretary has to say later. I also saw this one as well. Nigel Farage beats Keir Starmer in every respect, apart from one. There was an Ipsos poll that looked at a number of factors on how you rate someone, personality and performance, leadership strength, that kind of thing. And Farage won other than one category, which is quite an important one, you could say, which was honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're in number 10, you're probably holding on to that and thinking, well, if honesty is an extremely important thing for voters, then that could be in our favour. But clearly that's been a big problem, I think, for Keir Starmer, is that he's been able to be ahead of whoever was the Tory leader for quite a long time on those kind of questions, and now he's up against someone in Nigel Farage who is not able to come out on top in the polling, and therefore it's how much stock people put in having the leader and all that kind of stuff. How that kind of goes. And I think that is where he's going to find it tricky, that his personal rankings have never been high. It was just simply that he was up against people, Boris Johnson towards the end, then Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, who had very low personal ratings themselves, and therefore Labour were able to win. But I think he's going to find it difficult against Farage, who clearly has this kind of charismatic, kind of populist stance, and it's how much people are willing to put stall in that. We know that Reform is still really kind of a one-man band. It's whether people are willing to put their stock in him or as opposed to reform the party at the next election.
Yeah, true. And again, where is the money coming from? Well, Rachel Reeves has got 1.5 million quid to help young chess players. She's posted, having played chess at a young age, I know the transformational impact it can have on young people. Did she once claim to be the world champion and whooped Garry Kasparov or something like that? I can't quite remember, Alan, but it might have been in that ballpark. I'm always torn on this because every sport and every time we previously talked about this country not doing well in certain sports, it's been about a lack of investment. Then we had the Olympics in 2012. We did really well. It was widely seen that that was the legacy from the lottery coming through. It often takes many, many years to trickle down, and it did trickle down, and we did really well, swimming, cycling, those kind of areas. But is chess in the ballpark of where you... I mean, I'd like to think it is, but I don't know. Is it just done by... Is it just posh kids that do it, or is it... I don't play chess. My little boy plays chess, however, so... and he's certainly not a posh kid. So, well, posh compared to how I grew up. You know, when I was growing up, he was the kind of kid I hated. But that's another story. He's now my own son. So I don't know. Is chess is that a good use of public money? 1.5 million. Do we need chess champions to put our economy back on track?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not an amount of money that's going to put a dent in the wealth of the nation. So I don't think necessarily that's what, but therefore it does mean that actually, if you look at kind of funding as overall, it's divided across all the kids. It's not a huge amount of money per child for chess. I'll probably buy you like one pawn, I suppose, rather than a chess set. But you know, I think it's quite interesting. I like it when politicians do put money into their kind of passion projects. You know, we saw this kind of with Rishi Sunak. He really liked maths and he put that money into maths. And actually, it was interesting the government kind of took that money away and never used a similar amount to go for chess under Rachel Reeves. So I think, you know, it does have its kind of merits, and I think a lot of people say there are massive benefits to being good at chess, but you know, whether actually this is going to make a huge difference, whether we're going to see the next sort of British grandmaster as a result of this, we probably won't know, as you say, for sort of 10, 20 years.
I mean, it'd be great if we did. I don't know what it means for the wider economy. Listen, Alan, thank you very much, as ever. Alan Tolhurst, Chief Reporter, Politics. So I was just sort of slightly giggling to myself there, just thinking of whether I've never met, or in my industry, no one's ever sort of, I know of, has come to sort of the top of their industry in whatever respect, either in front of the microphone or behind the microphone, via the route of chess. I don't know whether... I mean, our producer is corn-fed Finn. Finn, do you play chess? He struggles with snakes and ladders, to be honest, Finn. You can always whoop him at a game of snakes and ladders. Says he's good at Scrabble, but I really struggle to believe he'd be any good at Scrabble. We might give it a go during the break. 0344 499 1000. Amy, do you play chess? Yeah, Amy can never remember the rules. I know one of them is an L shape. I think that's the knight, isn't it? I remember that, and that's really as far as I get. And you've got the little dinky ones at the front. They're quite fun, aren't they? Harmless little things. And I like to play with an ivory set because I don't have any problem with poaching. That's a whole other story. Peter is in Oxfordshire. Peter, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
I used to be very good at chess, actually.
Did you? Well, is it not one of those things like riding a bike that if you...
Yeah, a long time ago, when I was... The point I was going to make, Ian, is that the problem is largely, I think, generational.
OK.
I think a lot of your viewers and listeners and people my age, I think, probably remember the 1970s, or at least, you know, their parents do. But we've now got a generation, and it was interesting with this new party that Corbyn and Zona Sotara are setting up, that they reckon on polling that in the 18 to 24 category, the socialists have got a majority. And I think that that raises a big problem for us. I believed in the 1990s that socialism was dead.
Yes, I mean, it was sort of, but like a sort of Romero zombie flick. It kind of like came back to life somehow. Maybe it was never fully dead. I don't know. It was just resting, as the Python sketch would tell you.
One was Lehman Brothers in 2008, and I think that did a lot of damage in terms of the economic model of capitalism. And we never got round to really answering that and dealing with it. And secondly, I think the socialists have been beavering away all the time, particularly in the universities and now in the public sector. And they've used both economic and cultural Marxism to influence young people in a way that I think is very sinister. And I think it needs to be firmly confronted, because if it's not, then this is going to be carried forward into a future generation.
Yes, I do. I mean, there is that whole kind of rite of passage thing, isn't it? If you're meant to be a socialist if you're kind of sort of 16 to 25, that kind of age group. I don't know. But then there's also, like, if you look at Nigel Farage and Reform, Peter, there's also a surprising young group of people that quite like the cut of his jib as well.
Yeah, I think that is a possibly encouraging sign.
Is there a male-female divide on that, though, do you think?
Yes, there is. I think young women tend to be much more left in their thinking than younger men.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thought, really.
Even the good-looking ones.
I think we also remember.
Yes, I'm not serious, Ofcom fans. All right, just in case. Go on.
The only people who are in favour of socialism are people who've never lived under it.
That tends to be the case, doesn't it? And actually, you forget that Jeremy Corbyn was. You remember when he was, up against Theresa May, and they did all those TV debates.
He came perilously close.
But he was really good. That's the point. He's a good speaker, right? He's a really passionate speaker. And I remember at the time, people were phoning me on the radio show I was doing, who'd never heard of Jeremy Corbyn, by the way. People outside the sort of Islington bubble didn't know anything about him. They weren't familiar with the sort of mechanics of the Labour Party. I had people calling in going, I've never seen this guy. He's amazing. It's like, well, yeah, because he's promising you everything. Free broadband was the last thing he said before he got obliterated.
That's why it's the one who reads the room correctly, isn't it? I mean, Clinton, Trump, perhaps Nigel Farage, Boris. It's all very well. They could all win elections, but can they govern?
Well, it's all changed as well. I mean, Conservatives used to have the problem that they were, all about self-reliance and self-responsibility. So they had this curious almost disadvantage of going to an election saying vote for us, we'll give you very little, because they wanted people to do their own thing and be responsible, whereas of course the left were always vote for us, we've got everything for you, life's going to be cheap, it's going to be good, tax breaks, don't worry, we'll tax the filthy rich and we'll give it to the poor, and where everyone can have a car, everyone can have a dog, a house, and life's going to be good. Now I wonder, Peter, whether people are more about ideas. I mean, if you consider Reform UK's support doesn't come from a specific policy on education or the NHS. It's mostly about immigration, right?
Immigration.
Yeah.
But then immigration is a fundamental civilizational problem, isn't it?
Of course it is. Yeah, and it's never going to go away.
I mean, that's why that's what probably will win Farage to the next election, if indeed he does win it.
Yeah.
Because I think the concern, I mean, we hear it from your readers and your viewers and your listeners ring in. I mean, people are absolutely up to their necks.
Completely. Well, I think people can see a lot of knock-on effects now that perhaps wasn't the case many years ago. Listen, Peter, I have to run, but thank you. Great call. Lovely chatting to Peter in Oxfordshire. Adam Bell says, I got the sack when I worked at a chess set factory, for taking the night off. That's a quality dad joke, right? Or is it taking a night off? He said a, I changed it to the, but it still works. I like it. There's many, maybe we'll get a thread going of chess-based tomfoolery and gaggery. I'm sure there's a lot out there. We're going to be speaking in a moment to more of you on the big issue of the day, including, can this government last beyond this year? Can the government last beyond this year? And all the other associated issues. EV drivers. Did you buy a second-hand EV? How does that work? And by the way, one of the figures that they wanted to get to was something like, they want, by this stage, should be 28% of drivers driving EV cars, and something like 16 or 17% of van drivers. Are you an EV van driver? And if so, how the heck does that work? And I know how it works literally, but is that not more of a case of obviously range anxiety has changed from in the last couple of years. I understand that, but I would imagine it's more compelling as an argument when you're driving a bigger vehicle like a van. So how does that work? Also a bit of breaking news. Greg Wallace says he never set out to harm or humiliate and was deeply sorry for any distress his behaviour caused, in a statement to the PA News Agency after an investigation substantiated 45 complaints against the former MasterChef presenter. It seems Greg Wallace was mostly a bit 1970s in his humour, but there were a couple, as I understand it, and we will get more to a couple of examples where he'd been he'd made people feel uncomfortable by being a bit touchy. I don't mean to the point of sexually assaulting them. If you grab a stranger you never met and give them a big old cuddle that's a little bit too prolonged, then yeah, that's not acceptable. I think we all know that, don't we? And whatever else is on that list. But 45 complaints. He's never going to work again, really. So you do lose your livelihood, even if he has made a few quid. 0344 499 1000.
When it comes to breaking sanctions rules, ignorance is no excuse. Yeah. You have to make stringent checks when it comes to dealing with sanctioned entities or people to make sure that you are complying, even if you don't think there's a case to answer from the very beginning. You have to show you've gone through the process. So something's gone wrong with the BBC's processes, and given that this is such a high-profile case, it seems incredible that we wouldn't have, some sort of action taken that would see heads roll afterwards. But we'll have to wait to see, won't we?
But if you drill down to the stats, as I've done a little bit, it's clearly not just the super rich that are going, but people that want to make a living, make a business, just don't seem to be wanting to stay in Britain. Don't feel that this is a competitive environment to succeed in. 40,000 people alone moved to Dubai last year, on top of the 30,000 that moved the year before. Those are 2024 numbers. I would hate to think what 2025 numbers are going to be like, and that's just one country alone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk indeed. Let's go to some of your... Oh, by the way, another bit of breaking news. Constance Martin and her partner, Mark Gordon. These were the couple that disappeared. She was from aristocratic stock. Disappeared and were in court charged with the manslaughter of their newborn baby, which was found after the couple were located. Have just been found guilty at the Old Bailey of manslaughter of their baby. Sentencing probably won't happen today, but more detail as it comes through. Back to your comments. This from Tracy, who says, if the EV car is the best thing since sliced bread, why are people who get a mobility car not only allowed to have a British-made EV? This would help the industry and keep that idiot Miliband quiet, says Travis. Good point, actually. You'd think it'd be compulsory. Gary in West Yorkshire on the whole issue of EVs. Gary, what have you got for us?
Hello there, Ian.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's just like me, like probably millions of people.
Yeah.
I live in a mid-terraced house built 70-odd years ago when I think we all know that there was no traffic like there was then, you know what I mean? And I don't think any planner had the idea that we will be looking at what we're looking at today. Now, where I live, there is obviously, it's on-street parking. And a lot of these places are on-street parking. Now, obviously, the wonderful Labour Party are considering how we're going to deal with this. The trouble is, most people have, a lot of people have 2 cars. So that's your first problem. Here's your second problem. With on-street parking, as you know, it's a matter of it's on street. So it doesn't matter where you park as long as you're in that street. It might even be permit parking, but still as you're along on that street.
Yep.
Now, going back a few years, I don't get too much. I was just on my way to work. And there's a guy, and he had a drink, and because I was parked a little bit too much over onto his side, this was just about parking. He had a bottle of wine in his hand. He was going to glass me.
Wow. People get very upset about a drop of parking, don't they? So more so than reasonable levels of criminality. Parking is a thing that sends people absolutely tonto.
Can you imagine? Like you just said, like anybody said, you're on your last 10%.
Yeah.
And you can't park. It's going to be like the Wild West out there. And I'm sorry, but these people, the Labour Party, the wonderful Socialist Party, I am positive that all they're happy is for me to queue up on a bus stop on a cold winter's morning, to travel 3 or 4 buses to get to where I wanted to get to work, which in a car, diesel, by the way, would take 10 or 15 minutes. But they don't want that. They want me to travel with everybody else, and of course it'll be an electric bus, no doubt, and it'll tell you. But the point is, they don't think this out. It's just, in fact, I'll tell you what, it's disgusting. Firstly for me, because what we're going to do is, like you said about the second-hand car business, I mean, mine is a diesel car. The only thing that's going to go wrong with my diesel car is probably it'll rust away. The diesel engine will probably be there for go out clock a few times. Do you get the batteries? I worked in a warehouse, Ian. Let me just say one thing here. I worked in warehouses on the line. Warehouses require electric batteries for the fork trucks, etc.
Yep.
They change them batteries every 3 years. These batteries aren't like tuppence and that.
Well, that's the problem. The battery is the entire engine, right?
Exactly.
It's not like there's nothing else in there. There's no carburettor. There's no spark plugs. It's just a battery, right?
Right. So when you're on a counterbalance, a lot of people don't understand this in warehousing, but in warehousing, obviously, to lift something out of these forklift trucks, the actual counterbalance weight on electric trucks is the actual battery. Now, that's telling you something. The battery is the counterbalance for the ton weightage in front. So now they're on about putting these ton weights, which there will be, I know the lithium and that, but they still weigh more, on the road. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. You're an intelligent guy here. You go back in history and you go back to your toll roads. Weren't the toll roads all about weight originally? Is that why there's still today there's more probably heavier vehicles?
It's a good point. It was absolutely central. Weight was the issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now we're going to get on cars that's going to weigh double what they weigh now.
100%. Yeah. A car that weighs more than Canary Wharf. Listen, Gary, thank you for that. Gary in West Yorkshire. I mean, it does ultimately boil down to pros and cons of EVs. I understand that. But if you want to dig a little deeper, by the way, I know somebody's going to call me and say, yeah, you do get spark plugs in an EV. I'm sure you don't, by the way. But the broader point that he was raising, that Gary was raising, was that how do we know? It's something I've kept wanging on about. You can't mentally calculate, oh, look, here's a diesel car or a petrol car. It's 10 years old. It's done 50,000 on the clock. I can mentally make that work. I can do the calculation. That seems like good value for money. Yeah, it's a nice Audi, 10 years, 50, that's 5,000 a year. That's a gift. Or even if it's done 100,000 and it's 10 years old, I can make that. I can do the calculation in my head, and I can work out that kind of vehicle in the modern day, made very, very well. The Germans are great at this stuff. If it's done 100,000 mile, that's like something, years ago doing 30,000 miles. So yes, I'm safe to purchase that car because I understand that its mileage versus its model, taking into account the type of fuel, all of that, it works. Or it doesn't work, depending on what it is. So you wouldn't buy it. But with an electric car, you don't have that sort of frame of reference. There's no go-to comparison in your head. How did you deal with the second-hand EV? And do you drive an EV van? How's that working out? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 to 3. More of your comments. This from Kate, who says, I think what the government are trying to say, without actually saying it, is working class people. There, said it. Yeah, they kind of are. Because their brain and their mind works in that kind of way, right? It works in the sense that they think working class people are this, one hypothecated group, economically speaking, and then everybody else sort of outside that is stinking rich in some shape or form. So therefore they're ripe for a bit of good old taxation. And I really believe it's as crude as that. Even though the kind of socialists that we've got in power now have been through the various sort of cycles of Labour. They've seen the Corbyn experiment. They watched Thatcherism. They're aware of, you would think, they've had, a bit of a life lesson in their short careers in how stuff works economically. But I think Kate is actually right. It's working class people, so you lay bricks, you work in the docks, drive a taxi, then, you're our people. But if you have the audacity to run a business, then you're up for a bit of a financial kicking, because that's how we think. Everyone else is doing all right. What was it when we had what was the group of people that, was it Rachel Reeves or was it Rayner? One of them couldn't quite. Oh no, it was landlords, wasn't it? Landlords aren't working people. Was there this absolute nonsense, as if everyone that's a landlord is some kind of Chinese or Russian plutocrat that owns half of Mayfair? as distinct from Bob, who inherited his mum's home and rents it out to his mate Jeff down the road, securing himself an extra few quid a month. That's your average landlord, by the way. Landlords are not working people. That was the one. So I think Kate is bang on this one. Now, a new UK anti-violence scheme is being proposed to stop killers like Axel Rudakabana and David Amos's murderer before they strike. Prevents failures and lack of funding highlight the urgent need for tougher measures to protect lives. Let's speak with social policy analyst, regularly joins us on these kind of stories, Rakib Hassan. Rakib, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to have you with us. It's the old prevent under the spotlight again. Never quite worked out I mean, I know what the original purpose of it was, but are they fit for purpose?
Well, it's certainly not fit for purpose. And when we look at the horrific Southport atrocity, it's quite remarkable that the perpetrator, Axel Rudakabana, was referred to prevent on 3 separate occasions. And the reason why his case was ultimately rejected is because there wasn't a clear terrorist ideology. And I think that's part of the problem, that over time, when we look at the variety of threats that we face as a society, is becoming increasingly volatile, unpredictable and unclear. So this new recommendation, this sort of proposal that's being floated, that we have a new anti-violence scheme, which could involve people who have a morbid fascination with violence. Axel Rudakabana would have certainly fell into that category. He seemed to be obsessed with genocide, school shootings. He also possessed a academic study on a Al-Qaeda training manual, material on Nazi Germany, and also anti-colonialist literature. So it's clear that there wasn't a clearly defined ideology at play, but he very much posed a significant violent threat to society. And it seemed like Prevent was simply unable to handle this particular case, unfortunately, with devastating consequences.
Is there any way to make Prevent, or to prevent from being not being able to step up to the plate when needed? Because I'm sure if there was somebody from Prevent sitting here saying, well, it's all right, very well for you two pair of characters, me and you, banging on. If only you came to one of our meetings, you will know we are doing our very best. We want to spot bad people, we want to spot the signs, and we want to sort of try and help flag things. Something's gone horribly wrong. Do we have to conclude, Rakib, that we don't need a Prevent, or we just need a more robust Prevent? What is the deal there?
Well, I think that having a new anti-violence scheme could be helpful, because what that could do, that might reduce the load on Prevent, or rather what Prevent can focus on cases where there's a clearly defined, clearly identifiable ideology. So, for example, an individual that falls neatly into Islamist extremism, which is the primary terror threat that we face, and other forms of extremism, whether that be far right, far left. You have other emergent religio-political threats, whether that's Hindu fundamentalism or Khalistani extremism. You're talking about cases there where they can be clearly identified. But then you have other cases which are sort of mixed, unstable, and unclear cases where there's not a clearly defined ideology. In some cases, you could call it an ideological pick and mix, salad bar extremism. Or actually, there's not much of an ideological motivation, but there might be that almost ghoulish obsession with violence, which poses a threat to society. And I think if you have a more joined up approach with mental health services as well, that can help to reduce the load on our anti-terror structures in the UK.
Yeah, spot on. Listen, Rakib, thank you as ever. Rakib Hassan, social policy analyst with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you on that one as well. It is interesting that Prevent is... I think there's a lot of things happened. You can fall off the radar of Prevent, and it does require other... I get it. It does require other factors to keep Prevent relevant to certain cases. They're not completely solo on this. There's the police and there's social services and all sorts of people. I mean, there is that sense that, you know, ultimately, governments and societies do their best, don't they? They do their best when something bad happens. We say, right, we need to put measures in place to try and stop it happening again. And sometimes that makes perfect sense, and sometimes there is demonstrable proof that those measures had an effect, and they worked by putting measures into place. You know, there's obvious things in life where you have fewer accidents on motorways, or fewer fatalities on motorways now that they've got central reservations, and cars are made of different things. There's a seatbelt law, stuff like that. There's things you can point to and go, well, that works and that's obvious, so we did it. But isn't there a kind of irredeemable reality that, you know, in life there's just going to be some really bad people, and once in a while the really bad ones do some very disturbing things, and whether that's an act of terrorism, domestic murder, however it manifests, I just think the human pot of multiple types and characteristics and foibles and all the rest of it is just going to throw up a wrong 'un every now and again, and that wrong 'un will often be horrendously, lethally devastating. But actually rarely in the human pool, the genetic pool. They're rare, but when they happen, they're big and they're devastating. We will learn from this. Do we learn from this? I don't know. I'm not sure if you're a terrorist and you put, death penalties for terrorists. I don't think that would stop people being terrorists. I don't think the average terrorist probably doesn't care if they're executed. One here from Alan, who says, great show. Over the last 15 years after leaving uni, my wife and I have been lucky to move from working class to middle class. We know what both of these feel like, and we're now most certainly feeling we've moved back to the struggles we came from. We earn what was fairly good, but over the last 2 years, it's worth much less. We can't take more tax. I tell you what, Alan is absolutely bang on. When there's a kind of recession or a downturn, I think, and I don't say this with any qualification, but I sense, and I think Alan is obviously on the same page here, if you're doing all right, it takes a couple of years longer for it to hit you. And then it does hit you, and you think, well, because before that, you think, well, I'm going to be all right. I'm earning really good money, so I can still afford to go on holiday. But you don't realise that bit by bit, whether it's your food bill, whether it's your tax bill, whether it's filling up your car, the cost of bit by bit, you suddenly realise, and it's like the boiling frog thing. You don't spot it to start with. And I know this from my own experience. You suddenly go, well, hang on, where's the... I would normally end up at the month with this, and it's just gone down this... Well, where is it? Yeah, life just got expensive. It just took a bit longer to hit. And I think that's what's happening now. I've seen it with... certainly going out to a couple of places to eat and noticing how busy it isn't compared to how busy it might have been, a year or so ago. Things like that. Spotted it yesterday for the umpteenth time in a local pub that was, they've been busy 12 till 3, Sunday lunchtime, Sunday roast, but I still managed to get a booking in at 3 o'clock. And I know for a fact that would not have been the case 7 or 8 months ago, because it's a pub I know well, it's a pub I've tried many times. Unless you book it like a week before, you got no chance on the day of finding. And when we got there, it's just like, I thought, wow, there's like loads of spare. It was busy, but as a mate of mine who runs a pub says, everyone judges it, go, it's a Sunday, don't judge a pub by a Saturday or a Sunday. They're always, good ones are always busy-ish, certainly visually busy. But it certainly wasn't anything like what it would have been. And I wonder if that's a similar thing that Alan's talking about. But you're right, we don't want any more taxes coming around. Who does? But then the other question that follows is, who pays? 0344 499 1000. Lots more still to come. Back with you on more calls as well. And we're going to look at a lack of victims' rights in that new bill. We'll be speaking to Barnaby Webber's mother, Emma, on this very point in just a couple of moments. This is Talk. Our lines are open. Back. Oh, by the way, got the voice of doom as well. Coming back next.
Superman is an immigrant. And yes, the people that we support in this country are immigrants. And if you don't like that, then you're not American.
These Hollywood types, these liberal Hollywood types, you know, they live in a world that is not reflective of real America.
That's a privileged white man in Hollywood saying that.
Yeah.
So they're always the mouthpieces for these weird movements that have nothing to do with what's actually going on outside the gates of their mansions in Hollywood.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 10 to 3. Now, those impacted by mental health homicides could face being silenced under a new bill. This is the Victims and Court Bill. It will not grant individuals a statutory right to be told about decisions affecting the detention, leave or discharge of their offenders. Campaigners have called for the bill to be amended by guaranteeing that victims have the right to receive necessary information, be informed of key decisions and create a formal appeal process when information is denied. This is just extraordinary when you consider the ramifications and the knock-on effect with this. Let's speak with Emma Webber, mother of Barnaby Webber. Barnaby, of course, was killed in 2023 in the Nottingham attacks. Valdo Calocane, a paranoid schizophrenic, was responsible for those murders. Although I think I'm right in saying, Emma, they were not called murder in the conventional sense. Is that right? Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, hi, and thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to come on there. No, CPS decided to accept a diminished responsibility plea, so it was downgraded to murder, to manslaughter, but attempted murder of the three people who did manage to survive him, because there's no place for attempted manslaughter apparently.
Yes.
So it's
which is
that's a whole other story.
I was going to say, I mean, that would be something we could talk about a lot anyway on another story. But of course, we know that the man responsible had a long history of all sorts of mental health issues, of paranoid schizophrenia. Should never have been on the street. There were warnings, there were flags, there were, goodness me. We know that, but we might not know that under this bill.
No, I think it just fills in like everything that we have to do, and at every point of this tragedy has been a fight and has been uncovering failures, ineptness, negligence, and finding out only last week that the governments are quietly putting through what they are lauding as improvements to victims in this new bill. What they're not doing actually is that I would say it's an anti-victim bill, because it's more about protecting the rights of the individual. And these are under mental health disorders, and that's all I can speak on. Obviously, sadly, we don't have the murder of my son serving any form of punishment and penal side to his sentence. But the new proposals effectively say that families have no statutory rights. The victims have no statutory rights. We can make requests for information to be included, to be consulted. But I think we all know that requests, you can ask for anything in this life, can't you? Does it mean that you've got the right to get an answer?
And would that be details after somebody has been found guilty, or would it be anything about the perpetrator's background, you know, even during a trial? I mean, one would assume some information would have to come out.
Yeah, I believe, I mean, from what I've been speaking about today, it's to do with the release back into the community, and the fact that victims such as us, I mean, the true victims, Barney, Grace and Ian, sadly don't have a voice anymore thanks to Callacane, but we do, and we're still trying to survive this horror. But as it stands, we could only be considered if we asked for information. We have no absolute right. And he's on an indefinite hospital order, and despite being told that it's unlikely by the judge he'll ever see the cold light of day again, it's almost impossible that he won't, because statistically 98% of them are out within 20 years, and something like 80% is within 10. So he's he's responding apparently already, and doctors treat. They don't punish. So yeah, we're facing the horror of this monster being released with no consideration, no support, no rights to us. But it's not just our case. This affects and will affect so many. There are between 100 and 120 mental health related homicides a year, just to put into perspective. And I think it's 18% on average are to people not known to the killer. So it's not always to family members, as is often lauded. And of course, mentally unwell people do need and do deserve help and support and treatment, and they should. But like you've already said, some of the gross failures that we've experienced are at the hands of so-called doctors and professionals who failed to treat him, to recognise the signs and to stop this happening. And what they're proposing to do now is put the rights back into the hands of hospital managers to make that decision and consideration.
Why would, I mean, it seems extraordinary, Emma, that yourself and, Grace and Ian's family would not be given, to be, I'm not suggesting consulted, I know it doesn't work like that, but at least there'd be something where you would be told, okay, this person might be released in 2 years' time.
And I think it's not just speaking on our behalf. I think it's, as I say, we have to think broader on this, because there are so many families already in this awful situation where people have come out on the, hospital's decision, and they've gone on and committed a grievous offence straight away almost. Anyway, I think what's really scary for me is that Alex Davis-Jones, the victims minister, and Subhana Mahmood, our Justice Minister, have sat with me, with Grace's family, with Ian's family, with our support team in many a meeting, and we've discussed at length all of the failings. We've discussed the mental health bill. We've been discussing the review of homicide laws, even a 10-year health plan. Why weren't we consulted on arguably the one that will affect us the most, which is this? And I've written to both of those ministers, and as yet have not had the courtesy of an acknowledgement, let alone a reply. But I understand that their press office have replied to the media today, which I think is so sad. It's so disappointing. But we are calling to meet with them. And we are calling we go along with 100 Families charity who, know the real detail on this. I can only speak my truth and from my perspective.
But you wonder, if you can't get a meeting with these people, then in this context, who can?
But why should I have to come? Why should I have to, why should I have to do this? Why should you guys have to pick up this kind of awful story 2 years on, where it's been so widely covered how grossly failed we've been by the police forces, the hospital trust, the CPS, the whole system. But even now, it feels like failure. It feels like we are just. I did say. When we met the then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, when the sentencing had happened, and we were all aghast and horrified at what was happening to us, and we said we will not go quietly into the good night, and we won't, and it takes its toll enormously. But Ian, like I've spoken to some of your colleagues on here before, I will not stop until all of the truth is uncovered, and until there is proper change and proper. This miscarriage of justice and accountability is rooted out, and shouldn't have to do that. Victims are not considered properly in our society, and that's within the criminal justice system wider, not just from the mental health perspective. and that has to change.
100%. Well, listen, we will go on highlighting this as well, as long as it needs to be highlighted. But Emma, thank you for your time. I don't want to say I wish you luck in a campaign. It should be a given that you're listened to, frankly. When you lose a child in the horrendous circumstances, the barbaric killing of your son Barney back there in Nottingham, you along with 2 others, of course, you just think to yourself, hang on, if you can't get an audience with the right authorities as bereaved parents and family members, then who can? So we will watch and see if this does come good. But Emma, thank you for your time. Emma Webber with us here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. More of your comment on the way in a few moments. Right now, though, just approaching 3 o'clock, which means it's time for the latest news headlines on the hour, right here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through in this section, of course, including, of course, the extraordinary tale of a government. Yes, a Labour government. As a Labour government has hinted at tax hikes for middle-class workers. This was the Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander doing the media rounds yesterday. Did she let slip, or was she being told to drip feed the inevitable? It also comes on the back of, which, by the way, will be a huge U-turn if there are wealth taxes coming, because they're sort of trying to redefine what is a working person. This is absolutely nonsense. We'll look at that and continue to take your calls. Also this afternoon, a review has found that the controversial BBC Gaza documentary breached accuracy guidelines. You think, really? That's a surprise. Nobody expected that, did they? You get the son of a terrorist to present something in an impartial manner, just a good, wholesome young country boy presenting a programme. Turns out he's up to his neck in it, because the old man's a senior Hamas official. Accuracy guidelines, they wouldn't know the meaning of the word. This comes, of course, as outrage and public trust becomes damaged as Greg Wallace has 45 complaints against him upheld. This is a terrible, terrible state of affairs. And skilled visas for diversity experts, poets and bloggers have sparked a bit of a backlash. Do these roles align with the economic needs as the government aims to reduce net migration? We'll talk to Dame Andrea Jenkins, Reform UK Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, on that very point in just a couple of moments. Before that, Miranda is in Cumbria. We were talking about electric cars, Miranda. What are your thoughts on all of this? Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi.
It's a little bit ridiculous because if they want to sort out EV cars, what they're going to do with the batteries afterwards when they run out? Because essentially they're full of mercury, lithium, and is it cadmium?
Set fire to them in a public place, I think, is the idea.
Couldn't we? That would be great.
Be great for our health and our lungs.
That'd be great for our lungs. I mean, all you have to do is you look at Reuters and National Geographic, you see the lithium fields from satellite pictures, and they go from light yellow to dark yellow, and they use a lot of water for that, and essentially that then infiltrates the groundwater, which then people drink, and it's highly toxic. It's just mental.
I mean, what's interesting about this, though, Miranda, I mean, you know, we hear these stories every now and again, but we don't. Shouldn't we be hearing more about this?
We should really, but I don't think they're because we don't really see it in this country. But I know it was my son who said, even, you know, the ear pods, I'm not very technically minded, but that's full of lithium, and people just throw them in the bin. They're not recyclable. As with the EV batteries, they're not recyclable. So where are they going to put them? In probably a few hundred years, that's all going to leach out into the world.
Well,
which people are going to drink.
You kind of wonder, don't you? Because, I mean, is there I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here. Is there like a plan in place that you and I are unaware of? Are the lithium boys going to go, no, Miranda, no, you got it wrong. This is what we do with it. It's perfectly safe. It goes through a big old filter.
Yes, no, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry.
So these people are polluting, potentially.
Absolutely. The potential sort of for horrendous pollution and people drinking water which has been contaminated with some of these. I mean, it's like the Mad Hatters, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's full of mercury as well. We'll all just be mad, won't we, at the end of the day? So
crazy times. Miranda, thank you very much indeed for that. That's Miranda in Cumbria. This one from Matt. Do you think that we should have more referendums, like votes on the government out? That way they might cut the broken promises and focus on what they have promised to do. There is a couple of places, aren't there? I'm just tempted. Is there a Scandinavian model where they... I think there is some strict criteria on what you... Because otherwise you'd have to have a referendum every day, couldn't you? And you'd be... You know, everyone would be going, well, what, another one? What, another one? It would be a bit like that. Tricia says, why does nobody ask Miliband where all the wind farm blades, car batteries and solar panels are going to go once they've reached their 10 or 15 years life expectancy? And how green all this ridiculous agenda actually is. Talk about tunnel vision. Well, we will see how green it is. In the same way, we will see how logical this one is as well. Skilled visas for diversity experts, poets. I'm not making this up. I know it sounds like satire, doesn't it? We need it. You can really see this on, you know, some kind of satirical diversity experts, poets and bloggers. As you can imagine, it sparks a bit of controversy as immigration rules tighten post-2026. Are these roles really aligned with economic needs? Because that's usually the deal, isn't it? Oh, we need, I don't know, you know, a specialist orthodontist or something. We're short of them. Great. There's a load of, you know, great dentists in New Zealand or Papua New Guinea or something. They can come and do it. They know all about the mouth, so they'll be brilliant. But a diversity, we have to import diversity experts. We should be exporting diversity experts, by the way. Dame Andrea Jenkins is, of course, Reform UK Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Andrea, good afternoon to you. I mean, I'm tempted to say this is unbelievable, but nothing surprises us in the world we live in at the moment, right?
I completely agree. And I mean, to give visas for that, I mean, I'd get rid of the roles in the UK in its entirety, actually.
Yeah. I mean,
look, I'm recruiting at the moment for a caseworker.
Yep.
And, sorry, I think I'm all over the place. Yeah. I'm recruiting at the moment for a caseworker. And I just want the best person for the job.
Sure.
And I'm sure that, you know, if we got rid of diversity officers and just got whoever's right for the job, I mean, I'm a meritocrat, I'm not a feminist. I just like to see those with the right skills to rise to the top. Obviously, look, I'm neurodiverse. If somebody needs extra support when they're in work to get there, etc., that's important, isn't it?
Of course it is. Yeah, I mean, we all get that. But the idea that we'd have to import, I mean, poets, for goodness sake. Why do we need to import poets? I didn't know we had a shortage of poets. I've never, my life or the life of anyone I've ever met, Andrea, I've never heard someone say, you know, life's great at the moment. We're a bit short of poets, though.
Absolutely. And it's just bonkers Britain, isn't it? And it's been going this way right since we had Cherry Blair and Blair and the human rights as well. And I mean, I think that if we didn't have to tick these boxes, would have stronger people into government as well, don't you?
100%. I mean, you do wonder when every time something as bonkers as this comes up, my brain or my mind automatically goes to where the first meeting was held when someone suggested this, because presumably a man or a woman walked into work one day and said, "I've got this idea." You might think at that point that somebody threw a bucket of gunk over them and said, "Don't ever come back." But for some reason, they probably convened a very important meeting with 30 other people who think the same thing. And up the chain it went.
I mean, I wouldn't care if the whole cabinet was men or women, as long as it could do the job. Yeah. And I think that's what most of the general public think, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I can't stand all-woman shortlists. And let's just make sure we have an education system that allows people to get on. If they've got special needs, make sure they get their support. But ultimately, we want the creme de la creme in these top positions. And we should not be giving visas to people simply because we're trying to import these diversity officers. It's bonkers.
Completely. On a separate note, Andrea, how's it going in Greater Lincolnshire? How are you enjoying the mayoralty, if that is the correct term?
I mean, it's amazing. It's actually, I'm enjoying it even more than being an MP, actually, over the years, because you've actually got power to do stuff and really change people's lives. Yeah. And it's amazing, actually. And obviously, there's some bumps along the way where, you know, I'm having to sort of push back on certain things with officers, etc., which I do. And it's, for example, I mean, there was funding for some solar panels and this BESS battery operated systems to power them, and I push back on stuff like this, really. Yeah. Because I got elected to do stuff like that, so it's important you push back.
Yeah, I was going to say, how hard is it? I know that, you know, speaking to some, you know, friends of mine who are now, you know, local politicians in councils like Kent and the like, you've done really well. Obviously, councils, I know it's a very different position to the position of mayor. Many of them have said, look, you know, trying to get policy through or change policy, hard enough in government, as you know, in central government. It's like turning an oil tanker around. And obviously what you are trying to do, and others, is not just change things, but also put the Reform UK fingerprint onto things as well.
And I take that very seriously, Ian, because to me, you know, Lincolnshire's quite unique because we've got a Lincolnshire-run county council, and also we've got myself as mayor, which chairs the combined authority. So we've really got the opportunity to show how reform policy can actually work on the ground. Yeah. And I mean, I have asked for the profit and loss account every month, because I want to see, you know, on the bottom line, how taxpayers' money is being spent and to be challenging accordingly. Because that's important, because this is about us ensuring, you know, true transparency for taxpayers. And then on top of that, it's actually being able to make sure you're a voice as well. Because if you look, for example, Prax, the Lindsay oil refinery, is gone into receivership in Immingham in Lincolnshire. Yeah. Not much of the media is speaking about it, but there should be. You know, it's over 400 local employees, but we've got private contractors who have been working there over a decade as well. And they've got an oil reserve which goes straight to Heathrow. But obviously the Miliband government doesn't want to really talk about this much because it's not the green energy, is
no,
it?
it's oil. It's a swear word to Ed.
Exactly. So I think we need to be fighting for this because it's about energy independence. As I said, they're the only one with a direct line to Heathrow as well. And I'm not hearing many politicians speak up about this. And so I had a meeting there today with the workers, and I'm going to keep pushing, actually.
Good, and I'm glad to hear it, and I think your constituents will be, or those that voted for you certainly will be. Andrea, thank you for coming on, really appreciate that. Dame Andrea Jenkins, she is, of course, the Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. It's interesting because Reform have a mayor, they run the council there, they have an MP, of course, in Richard Tice. I mean, just think about that change. If you're just a little bit interested in politics, just digest that for 1 second. Doesn't matter whether you support reform, you could be an arch socialist. The seismic shift on how public appetites are altering, not just a reaction or a protest vote, a genuine desire for change. Reform, a party that wasn't, I know I always seem to use this phrase, a party that didn't exist half an hour ago, is now got the mayoralty. They're running the council, the county council, and they've got an MP up there as well. In fact, just down the coast in Essex, they've got an MP there too. So that is massive. And then all the other parties are going, well, what's happened here then? We can't work out what's happened. Yeah, well, if you talk people's language and represent people instead of just doing the kind of nonsense mumbo-jumbo stuff that we are really fed up with, particularly after, when we were fed up with it under the last Conservative government, we're really fed up with it after this one. Because, like, nothing is happening over there in Starmer's head, it seems. Back to EVs. This is Michael in Southend. I asked the question, Michael, about people driving electric vans, and I understand you do. Is that right?
Correct, yes. OK, so my company provided me with the electric van 2 years ago.
Yep.
I love it. It's good. The only time I ever have to go to a garage is when I take it in for a car wash. I've not been in a garage and done anything with it other than that. I do it from home. They put the EV charging point on my garage at home.
Yep.
So that was good. When I first got it, there's a few things to point out here. When I first got it, the range on it was 205 miles.
Okay.
It's now down to 183 after 2 years. So it's lost a few mileage off it, a bit off it. Having said that, you would never get 183 miles out of it, because once you start turning on air conditioning, electric roots and this, that and everything else, it drains the charge slightly. Another thing about it, a good thing about it from the home point of view, is if the voltage drops, so you realise it in your house, if your lights start dimming and this, that and the other, so if the voltage drops at all, it will render your charger useless. So until you call out UK Power Networks and they sort out the voltage to be exactly what it should be in your property, you're not going to be able to charge your car up. Okay. Also, the range on it, it's not bad for what I do, because I just go I live near Southend, as you're aware, and I go into Dagenham and Barking and Ilford, and I just do that each day. But if they was asking me to go somewhere else, I wouldn't be able to go, because to charge it up then at anywhere else, a charging point somewhere else in the country, it's going to take you half hour, 3/4 of an hour just to. And that's
and that's assuming you can get on and you're not in a queue, of course. So,
driving around.
I was just going to say on that point, Michael, home charging seems to be the most efficient way of doing it.
It's brilliant, because what I do is it tells me how much I'm using each time that I charge it up, and I build a company, and the company pay for that at the end of the month. So I'm probably doing about 180 to 200 quid a month on that, but going out 5 days a week, from Southend to Barking, Dagenham, wherever. So that for me, but I drive around all these places, and I can tell you now, 100%, they are never, ever, ever going to be putting charging points in all round. There is street after street after street of terraces, and you can't. They're all permit parking. You've got the traffic wardens running around all over the place. There's nowhere to park your car. And like,
not going to happen, is it?
One of the callers you had on earlier said about people now have got 2, 3, 4 cars.
Yeah.
You've got no chance. There's absolutely zero chance that can ever happen. Zero. And Ed Millipede, whatever you want to call him, he's just complete Fruit Loop, as far as I'm concerned.
That's about right. Listen, love it. Michael, thank you very much indeed. That's a great example of the realities of where we're at. And I've never quite understood why... I mean, I think that's really easy to understand, isn't it? Which is why I've never understood why they don't understand, as in the politicians. So it's not hard to go, look, we've got a road after road after road, to coin Michael's term. Well, you're never going to put a charging point. You're never going to get a charging point there. And I know you get super fast charging points, but, you know, in other places. But broadly, you're never going to put a charging point there. You won't be able to do it. So what's all that about then? And where does that leave us? And that's not to mention the poisoning that Miranda, our previous caller, mentioned. If you can counter any of this stuff and you don't agree with what you hear, we're all ears at this end. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Superman is an immigrant, and yes, the people that we support in this country are immigrants, and if you don't like that, then you're not American.
These Hollywood types, these liberal Hollywood types, you know, they live in a world that is not reflective of real America.
That's a privileged white man in Hollywood saying that.
Yeah.
So they're always the mouthpieces for these weird movements that have nothing to do with what's actually going on outside the gates of their mansions in Hollywood.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. More from you. Margaret in Birmingham says, no way can this useless government last until Christmas. They haven't got a clue. We have the worst government ever in charge of our great country, and we need a strong leader who puts the British people first. It ain't Starmer, that's for sure. 100% Margaret, thank you very much indeed for that. Lee says, afternoon, I own a car repair garage. The car battery is only half the problem. Pick any electric car and get a price on a wing mirror or a headlamp that's often damaged. You could buy a Fiesta for the same cost. Yeah, that's the bit, isn't it? It's that kind of bit of a closed market. One here from Peter who says, I had a call from someone telling me that as long as I lived in my house for 10, 15 years, solar panels would pay for themselves. In other words, I'm paying for my electricity use up front. yeah, if you look at it that way. Nigel's in Norwich. What have you got for us, Nigel? Hi. Electric cars.
Yeah, hi Ian. So I'm a used car dealer, and in terms of pricing, I mean, we're already seeing that the second-hand market for used EVs is on the floor, and I can tell you now there are large auction houses right across the country that have got EVs that are not making a third of their book value. Now, so I'm not talking about the new value.
Yep.
So let's say the new value of a car is the 60,000, and the depreciation and everything. The car is worth 20,000 after 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
It's not making 20%. It's not making even a third of that 20,000. So that's they're not making anywhere near book value. So you've got a complete market there which is becoming saturated now with used EVs stuck in auction houses, for one. But as a used car dealer, I mean, I've talked to the general walks of life people, and once the tree huggers have taken their allocation of EVs, and all the leasing companies and company cars owners taking their allocation, you're left with the general masses. And just talking to the people that I do, the general masses don't want them. Everyone says the same thing.
Wow.
I'll hang on to my petrol, I'll hang on to my diesel car for as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I think as we get closer towards 2030 or 35, whether they've moved it to now, I don't know, and they cut off the diesel or combustion engine production and force us down the EV route, I think second-hand car prices will rocket, because you'll get people hanging on to or trying to buy the latest car that they can buy with a diesel or petrol engine in, so they don't have to buy electric. And I think that's where the market will go. And another thing with EVs, and one of your other callers mentioned it, but I know a little bit about trucks and heavy trucks. And so the tractor unit of a truck that pulls your trailer that you see, supermarket trailers and every other thing, across the country, a typical sort of price of a tractor unit now new, people don't understand the cost of these things, but is up to about £150,000. That's just for the bit pulling the trailer. That's not the trailer itself. If you buy an EV of one of those, you are talking 320,000 for the same thing in an EV. So what is that going to do to everything we buy, be it clothes, food, anything that comes on a truck, and everything comes on a truck to all of us? Yeah. That's all that's going to do is just push prices right up.
So the only way around this, really, Nigel, is if they start giving away cars.
Well, they're doing it already. I mean, I had a conversation with a friend of mine last week, and this was interesting. He leases a Volkswagen, a model, but £225 deposit, £225 a month. And he said to me, fantastic car, lovely car, but they couldn't give them away quick enough at the dealership.
Wow.
He said, we took one, and we run it around, and for what his wife does with it locally, great. 400 miles a week, all local, like your previous caller, doing all stuff within an area. They went from Norwich to Coventry, and they had to charge it up. They stopped at a filling station to do that, and I had to wait, and obviously the 45 minutes to do the charge.
Sure.
Whilst they're doing that, they go into a Costa and spend 25 quid on coffees and donuts and everything else. So, and the same on the return journey. So that in itself, just cost effective. It's stupid, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, that's
brilliant.
Well, it's just crazy. So I don't think electric is going to be the answer. Personally, I think hydrogen will be the answer for heavy trucks and everything else. But
it's going to be interesting how, they may well ditch this technology and go for something else. So there's another global revolution.
They'll have to, because there's just no... I mean, you take people like me and second-hand car dealers, small garage owners, people under the arches that are doing your repairs now and fixing your gearboxes and clutches and brakes and whatever on your car. Imagine all of that. Imagine them all being wiped out because none of them can work on an EV vehicle. They don't know enough about them. They don't want to know about the technology. Everything is going to be swap out, a battery and swap in a new one. Yeah. And all the stuff that we do on cars now isn't going to happen, is it? That industry is going to be gone.
Completely. But we'll await the hydrogen one, see what happens there. Listen, Nigel, great call. I love chewing the fat on this stuff from people who know their territory, like Nigel in Norwich, who I think probably knows a darn sight more about this than Ed Miliband does. Davey is in Edinburgh. Talking of Ed Miliband, Davey, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Well, the zealots and the nutters.
Yeah.
preaching to us about, Britain, we're going to be the world leaders, we want to pollute the planet. It's okay, what we'll do is we'll just export our pollution to another country. We'll let them dig up rare earth minerals and chemicals and supply them to us, and then we'll build it. We can always say, well, it's not us, really, we're not doing that. There's mines in Chile, I can't remember the name of it, it's about 2.25 miles deep. We're getting rare earth minerals for there.
Wow.
We're getting rare earth minerals for the African, the Congo, Democratic Congo of the Republic, Congo. They're using child labour. It's madness.
I mean, this is these aren't minor errors. These are mind-blowing. I mean, if you know this, Davey, our previous couple of callers made similar references about the lack of safety around the stuff. Then, I mean, presumably Ed Miliband must know this. He's the Secretary of State, for goodness sake.
Well, when I mention climate emergency and everything, I say, well, it's not actually, it's climate evolution. It's evolved for millennia, and it will keep on doing it, no matter what we do.
100%, and those kind of people they're so wedded, Davey, to that ideology that and they think they're saving the world. So it's worth, sometimes having to bypass the normal rules to save the world, right?
Yeah, well, they're damaging the world, not saving it. I'm afraid. They're killing us.
Indeed, it's just us. Listen, Davey, love it. Thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000. I was going to mention this, by the way. I clocked this story a little earlier. Maybe I should have probably spoken to Finn, our producer, on this, because there's probably a whole phone-in on this. And that's people who go backpacking on their own. And I just think you have to be some kind of half-wit, right? To go, right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to I've got a great idea. There's two groups of people here. You know, people who get sponsored for going, they go, oh, I'm going to go and build some mud huts in Peru. Can you sponsor me? And you think, okay, how long are you going for? Oh, it's about a year. Right, okay. How long are you building the mud huts for the orphanage? A couple of weeks. So, well, sorry, run those numbers by me again. So you're going for a year, and for 2 weeks, you're going to raise some money to build some huts for an orphanage. Yeah. Right, and you want me to pay for... You're asking me to pay for your holiday, mate, aren't you? That's what you're doing. You're going, can you pay for... Please? That's what you're asking. You dopey what's-it. You can't be asking folk to pay for your trip. So there's that group, and then there's the other group, and it's particularly more dangerous when it's girls on their top. I've got a couple of female mates who did it like in their 20s. And one fairly recently as well, and I just thought, that's absolutely bonkers. I wouldn't do... like, you see this in the same way. Like, women's safety is clearly in a different premium to men's safety, all right? Walking home late at night. And you think, I would never walk that route home as a bloke. And, look at me, all right? If you're watching visually, you look at me, say, he's not only a good-looking bloke, he's obviously a fighting fit with ninja qualities, all right? So I've got all of that going on, and I still wouldn't walk down the Old Kent Road at midnight. Not in a mirror. New Cross, 1 in the morning, get in the bin. What do you think I am, a suicidal maniac? Not a chance. Get me in a cab, for goodness sake. Not an Uber, London's finest, black cab, only way to travel. Not even on a bus. So, yeah, and I see girls, like 17, 18-year-olds, where are you going on your own? That's just so dangerous. And sometimes I know you lose your mates and you haven't got, it's going to be too expensive. You might feel more vulnerable in an Uber than you would walking, frankly. There's that, I understand that. But going backpacking, that's a whole different ball game. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and walk around some mountainous areas that no one's ever been to, hasn't seen human life for 100 years, but I'm going to be the first person. I was reminded of the story of Caroline Wilger, who's a 26-year-old German national. She was rescued it always ends in a bloody rescue, doesn't it? What happens? I was just being creative with my backpacking. Yeah, they had to send out 55 helicopters and an army to find you. So there it is, a backpacker who survived nearly 2 weeks lost in Western Australia's outback has said she's simply beyond grateful to have survived. She's lucky not to have been nibbled by a dingo, because that's one of the problems you have down under. She survived by drinking from puddles and sheltering in a cave. Oh, aren't you brave, you dozy what's-it. I mean, you haven't got many options, have you? You don't go to a cave and go, no, not this one. I'm going to go up a tree. Snakes down under, you got to be careful. So, male, female, backpacking on your Todd, like just going solo, is, I just think, apart from anything, surely it's not quite as fun, is it? You want to do that with a mate. There's that. And I have got mates who've done this and say, well, when you get there, you meet loads of other people. Not Caroline Wills, she didn't meet anyone. She got stuck in the outback. 0344 499 1000. 25 to 4. We're going to talk what's going on at the BBC in just a couple of moments' time. Keep it here. It's Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 25 to 4. Lots to look at here. The BBC facing... when are the BBC not in a crisis at the moment? Facing crisis of trust as Ofcom warns of a public backlash ahead of a damning report into some scandals. There's the Gaza documentary, where they decided the best way to get good objective journalism is to get the son of a terrorist to present it, or words to that effect. Glastonbury, the death to the IDF issue with the horrendous doubling up with kneecap. Director General Tim Davie under fire and fighting for his job. Meanwhile, there's the Greg Wallace. This is quite a, perhaps the more tangible story, has been dismissed after substantial misconduct allegations, with the BBC stating he won't return. Let's speak to the TV editor over there at The Sun. Rod McPhee is with us. Afternoon to you, Rod.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you. I mean, there's a bit of I just mentioned a sort of trio of jip that has come to BBC's way. I mean, we could have gone on. There's always something happening there. Look, I get it. It's a massive organisation. Doesn't all happen on one day. It's not every day. But, they are, the trusted face, supposedly, of journalism. They're financed by us. So the bar is a little higher to some degree with the BBC, and rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a real crisis of faith with the BBC at the minute because, as you say, there's been a series of things that have all come at the same time. And Greg Wallace seems to feels like one of the bigger of the recent events, certainly, and it seems to be one that struck a chord with the public because, of course, MasterChef is just such a huge show. So it has extra meaning for the viewing public, I think.
Indeed, and I mean it's kind of extraordinary. I wonder, and I think the the original sort of defence of the BBC was, well, it's not, we don't make it. We don't make the programmes.
Yeah.
They're independent companies, so it's not like we're there, and unless it comes under our kind of HR watch, we would really have no idea. But I simultaneously think, and I've long thought this, ever since that whole Jonathan Ross and what's his name? The managing corporate Russell Brand debacle at Radio 2 all those years ago, where it was almost as if, we didn't let the boys do what they need to do. They're too famous almost for intervention. Yeah, I think the BBC has got a lot of that going on.
I do too, and also whenever these things happen, they see the situation and the focus seems to flip-flop a little bit between the BBC and the production company.
Yeah.
So just to explain, this show is made by Banijay, an independent production company for the BBC, and what the BBC kind of do say is, well, it's not really for us to sort of monitor these things because officially someone like Greg is employed by Banijay. But then today, this morning, the BBC put out a statement in light of the report coming out, which they basically said they want to reaffirm there is no place for the abuse of power, unacceptable behaviour or language at the BBC or shows made for the BBC. Yeah. So they've made that distinction here. But what often happens in the beginning, it sort of feels a little bit like, it's nothing to do with us. Over to the production company, it's an HR issue. Yeah. I don't think anyone really, that washes with many people, though.
I wonder whether, what seems to have happened with Greg Wallace, there are some more serious allegations. Some sort of suggest it was a bit Jim Davidson in his humour from the 1970s, and he talks a little bit about his own sort of horizontal lifestyle. Like, who wants to hear that, for God's sake? Yeah. But it was a bit like that. Me and the missus this morning. It was all of that. The old sort of fruit and veg man, which is what his background is, was kind of there. And I wouldn't want to lose a man his job because he was a bit, a bit like that. Like, somebody could take him out the back and go, Greg, mate, it's 2025. Yeah. Can you quit with the burn of manning material and just get with the thing? That's fine. But some of the suggestions were a little more than that. It was a little bit sort of handsy in a couple of areas. I don't think anyone suggesting he sexually assaulted anyone. No. But there is a suggestion he was a bit too over-tactile.
Yeah, what's interesting is that there were 83 complaints that they looked at. 45 of those have been upheld. And most of them, by Banijay's admission, revolve around language and behaviour rather than actual physical contact. I think there's only one case of physical contact, and Greg himself basically says that was down to he basically seemed to say that was down to interpretation. He said, I challenge the remaining issue of unwanted touching, but have had to accept a difference in perception, and I'm deeply sorry for any distress caused. But
I wonder what is it. I know we shouldn't have to try to analyse it in any defence of him. Yeah. But many would say, what is unwanted touching? If you give somebody a hug, is it a prolonged hug? Is it that?
This is it. And also, if someone's standing at the MasterChef counter cooking something, and he comes up and puts his arm round them,
is that unwanted touching?
Exactly. I mean, maybe it is. But how many people in the course of their everyday working lives do touch someone? I was saying that sometimes when I've been told to go and interview someone, I'll often have my picture taken with them, and what is quite normal is to put your arm around them. And now I will,
male or female,
yeah. But even if you ask them, well, is that what wanted or unwanted? You could say that's a grey area, and he seems to be suggesting this instance is a grey area. So it's interesting.
3 claims that he was in a state of undress. This will be his neurodiversity kicking in, of course, because we all know that if you have a bit of ADHD or autism, your initial reaction is to drop your trousers. I know mental health charities have been saying, don't drop them. It's been a slogan, I'm sure, on one of those mental health charities. This upset a lot of those charities because they went, what the hell's he talking about? Dropping your trousers? Yeah. It's something to do with autism.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that bewildered most people, and I think there would probably be quite a lot of people that were sort of saying, well, just because you've got autism doesn't mean that you can behave like this, or indeed is more likely to make you behave like this. You know, I mean, there was that hypersensitivity caused by his autism, which he says meant that he couldn't wear underwear. So that was also why he was going around talking about not wearing underwear. It's just a whole kind of murky, slightly grubby.
I mean, even if you, I mean, there are sensory issues that go with that. I get it, which are like socks and, you know, but you wouldn't have to tell anyone about it. I don't think that bit goes with it.
No, exactly. And I think that's where Greg often really lets himself down, is that okay, he does things which you could kind of explain to some degree, but then he takes it to the next level and you go, no, we're not really buying that, Greg, you know. So, you know, it was a little bit like when he first had the allegations levelled at him. One of the things he says was that that the people complaining were women of a certain age and a certain background, and it just takes it to the next...
He actually released that on a video.
Yeah, he did a video, and he said this, and you kind of go, well, what you've done there, you've immediately alienated half the planet, because you're basically saying that these, well, they're women, so they would have said that, wouldn't they? It's all very strange.
Yeah, a friend of mine appeared on Celebrity MasterChef, and she said it was kind of a bit non-stop, this, like, he couldn't stop himself, just like, almost like a commentary, constantly. Yeah. And she couldn't work out whether it was, you know, I think she was half expecting Stephen Mulhern to come in and say, you're on some hidden camera show.
Really?
You know, we tricked you.
Yeah.
You've got a sort of like slightly casual racist 1970s comedian. No, it was just Greg messing around and you've been had, you know. Then Noel Edmonds walks in with a gong or something. She said it was weird. It was really weird.
We've heard similar stories. You know, we get anecdotes from people that have been on the show, both the civilian version and the celebrity version, and they all say similar things. I guess it's just a question of how you interpret what he says, you know, because you know, one person's smutty gag is another person's inappropriate remark. Now, I'm not saying this to defend him in any way. I'm just trying to tap into perhaps what he would sort of say, and he says he's been hung out to dry by the BBC, basically. He says he's been the victim of a trial by media, and the BBC have let him be at the centre of that trial.
Well, and also, that, you know, he could not unreasonably say, look, if you look at this, 3 times a year I told an inappropriate joke. Really? And you're going to I lose my livelihood for that?
Yeah.
Come on. You know? And, you know, if you put that in front of a jury, they might say, yeah, you shouldn't lose your livelihood, and you know, it's frankly a waste. So. But we live in interesting times, don't we? Because and also you then start to project stuff onto people. You go, I bet that Greg. Well, I bet he's, you know, he's a bit of a wrong. And I always knew he was a wrong. Well, you never said it before. You didn't really. I used to see him on the train on the way home. He was obviously filming something on the same time I got on the train. So for a couple of months, he was always on there. Very popular. People coming up to him, you know, you're like, Greg, how you doing? You know.
I think perhaps one thing that also doesn't go in his favour is he doesn't particularly look or sound like your kind of erudite, sophisticated, you know, the kind of people that you would normally see on the BBC, shall we say. Now, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm simply saying that is just a fact. He doesn't look, and it does look and sound like a regular bloke on the street, shall we say. I think that's what made him popular. And I think what he's alluding to here is, in the statement that is released this afternoon, is the fact that he's suffered because of that, that the situation has been made much worse for him, because I think, you know, there's a problem with perception there.
And I also, although he probably wouldn't reference this because it wouldn't help him in other ways, but it would be said that because of other high-profile stories, Hugh Edwards and people like that, because of that, everyone is hyper-vigilant at any kind of...
That's right.
Anything that might just eat, as mild as it might be. You know, if you go there, someone's going to report you.
Well, I mean, I think the mishandling of the Hugh Edwards case has really set the bar, and I think that most people look back at the Hugh Edwards instance and sort of say, well, you know, that's a classic example of how not to do things, and it's also a classic example of how someone can rise through into the very apex of the hierarchy of an organisation and get away with murder. And that's what he did. And I think now that if anyone misbehaves, it's like, well, here's another example of them getting away with murder. I also think that Greg slightly suffers by recent instances with like Gino D'Acampo, with Wyn Evans, both kind of, how do you put it, sort of cheeky chappies who overstep the mark.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the perception of them anyway. I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. And now people are like, well, what's Greg? Is he a cheeky chappie, just an old school geezer that's overstepped the mark? It's really difficult to say.
Oh, isn't it?
But all I'd say is that the BBC and Banner J are taking a very firm line here. They've just said he's gone, and what was even more telling was that the BBC said we have no plans to work with him in the future.
Yeah. So he might have made a few quid, but his reputation is probably worth more to him right now. And that's going to be pretty hard to sell. Them,
yeah, absolutely. And he has made the case in his statement this afternoon that he said, "I will, with full legal support, be considering my next move." So this may drag on and on and on.
And just very briefly, it would be failing spectacularly, Rod, not to ask you about this Gaza documentary, where Lord knows how this got through quality control.
Yeah.
Where the son of a senior Hamas official, presented the programme as an ordinary country kid in Gaza. And no reference to the fact. I mean, you know this as a journalist, that breaks every journalistic rule in the book, and particularly in news, and particularly on an issue so sensitive as this.
Yeah, completely. And I think the thing that always staggers people within the media is that we all know that to do anything at the BBC, you have to go through so many protocols, you have to speak to so many layers. I mean, we complain about the red tape there, which and probably is a bad thing, but people just don't understand how on earth an organisation that's so wrapped in red tape and hierarchy can allow that to happen, that somehow these producers and execs manage to just circumnavigate all of those procedures in place to stop this from happening, and then it still happens. It just bewilders most people within the media.
Well, you know, if you're in the same building as us here, if you came back with a big interview, said, you won't believe who I've got, I've got this person who claims that they, you know, and your boss would immediately go, who is it? You know,
100%.
Who's that person? You wouldn't get that in print unless you could satisfy someone around you who it was. So someone must have known.
Of course. And you would think with Gaza and Israel and the conflict over there, you would think that you would be doubly, triply cautious.
They'd already been under the microscope.
Absolutely, yeah. You think everything that had happened before, because there was already a huge amount of complaints had come in, and here they are in this situation. You would think that they would be doubly and triply careful, but how that happened will
they
never...
only needed to stick it up on the screen, so the person that is speaking is the son of, and in that way they'd be clear of all of this, and you can make up your own mind whether they were balanced or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, you almost wonder how they could not have known that. You know, either they knew that and ignored it, or they just didn't know at all. But how can you not know?
When I worked at the BBC, Rod, there was somebody came up with a bright idea. I used to hate outside broadcasts. So I love the comfort of a radio studio, you know. It's like I'm a bit too lazy, frankly. So anyway, somebody said we need to go to, and they came up with a railway station we needed to go to do this piece. And this guy at the table, around the table, a very senior editor went, there's a problem here, there's a problem. And I thought, oh, hello, what's the problem? I hope it's a problem, because I might not have to go. And he literally went, high vis. And we went, what? Sorry, what?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have to wear high vis, because where the station is, you need to be, and it's like, can we just do the editorial stuff first? Because like the journalistic stuff, and then come back to your high... Anyway, that went to another meeting. My point of saying that is, as you rightly identify, you have to go... This was about a flipping OB on a regional BBC station. And it went through about 10 meetings before it, by the way, it never happened. Hey, thank God, got me way in the end. But and something as big as this, with so many senior people at the BBC,
100%.
paid impressive salaries just to do this kind of stuff.
I mean, the hoops that they have to jump through. But the strange thing is, it's not just Gaza, it's not just this with Greg. So many instances happen at the BBC where things go horribly wrong, and the staff there, because obviously we know people within the organisation, or know people that know people, they are utterly bewildered as to how on earth it could have happened, and yet it happens time and time again.
Does indeed. Listen, Rod, thank you. Good to see you. We will speak again. Rod McPhee is TV editor over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. Back with you coming next on Talk.
Whether it's funded by national government or local government, it's all taxpayers' money. Government doesn't have any money of its own. It's all taxpayers' money that's been raised from the productivity of people in the private sector who go out and create jobs, create activity, and create wealth for the country, and the people that are being hit time and time again. But you're absolutely right. The Doge unit has been looking at this, and Kent, I think it's the first council where we've started to publish some figures, and there's really quite extraordinary things that money's being spent on. You say crazy golf, circus trips, Amazon vouchers, and each individual thing might sound like a small item, but it all adds up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
From Fee in Berkshire, who says, great show, Labour are done. They keep digging their own hole to be buried in. People have had enough, and I feel that due to their lack to read the room, we may see riots like those seen when the poll tax was introduced by Thatcher. The electorate are preparing and standing against them. Labour are full of blumbering idiots that don't know common sense when it smacks them in the face. Well, very well put. Let's go back to the other issue as well this afternoon. Oh, this from Margaret, by the way. No way can this useless government last. They haven't got a clue and hopefully gone by Christmas. I might have read this from Margaret in Birmingham, but it is definitely worth another airing. They'll go down as the worst government in history. We need a leader who puts the British people first. David's in Shropshire. Reference EVs, the old electric car. Have you got one, Dave? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, just a quick one. A friend of mine has a car dealership locally and sells a lot of electric cars, mainly produced in China and Japan. He got invited over to watch the car batteries being produced. Spent a couple of days there understanding, the whole process and so on.
Sure.
Make it easy for him to be able to sell these cars when he gets back. Anyway, the guy who ran the electric battery factory told him that if you stuck with a traditional diesel car, let's say 2 litre diesel, it would take you'd be able to do 180,000 kilometres in that car, and you'd use about the same carbon emissions that you use to produce a car battery.
Wow. So, because it's not a like for like, as I understand it, the carbon footprint of the electric car is greater to start with than the petrol or the diesel car.
Yeah, absolutely, But he said, it's around 180,000 cars 180,000 kilometres using the same carbon emissions, and then the problem doesn't finish with that just there, because then you can't dispose of the batteries. They've got to go to landfill.
Yeah, so if you add all that together, why is nobody addressing this? David, I've got to step in because we're about to hit the news. You've been great. Thank you for finishing off on that very relevant point to all of this. Peter Cardwell is in for Jeremy Kyle after the news.
Hello there.
Are you here all week?
No, Jeremy's had a few train difficulties, so I'm here today.
Right. Loves the train issue.
Well, indeed, he's here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Because he drives the train as well, that's the problem. Yeah,
drives the train mad. Yeah. And he's here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'm back on Friday, so just slightly different this week.
There you go. Bookending.
Indeed. Bookending Jeremy Kyle, indeed.
Yeah. What's going on?
Well, lots to talk about in regard to the Gaza document.